please, I've just come back to my flat and the door was locked, so I crawled through the window and my flatmate's covered in blood in the bathroom. Oh my God, she's dead.
Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Welcome back to Case Documentaries. I bring you true crime, disturbing stories and other things that you may later regret knowing with regular uploads every week. Please do join the quickly growing Dark Case family by hitting subscribe now and turning on notifications. Thank you so much to all of my patrons. If your name is on screen right now, then you're a legend. Our love and respect goes out to all those that knew and loved Alice and all those affected by this dark case. Alice Ruggles, who was born on Christmas Eve in 1991, was the second youngest of 4 children born to Clive Ruggles and Sue Hills. She enjoyed a close-knit relationship with her siblings as they grew up in Leicestershire, England, in the quiet village of Langton. By all accounts, Alice had a pretty idyllic childhood. It was filled with unconditional love from parents and a loving, fun-filled relationship with her siblings. With her quick wit, empathetic nature, as well as her outgoing personality, Alice made friends quickly. Her beautiful smile and joyful personality drew people in towards her. She was comfortable with being in the limelight since she was a natural entertainer. Alice was a young woman who enjoyed performing in school concerts. She had many interests and hobbies, and one of her favourites was fencing. This is a hobby she began doing at 11 years old. Her love of fencing led to spending time on a national fencing circuit, and this even influenced which university she selected at age 18. She attended uni in Northumbria, becoming captain of the fencing club. After graduation, Alice had no trouble finding a job that she loved, and her future really was looking bright. She moved into a flat on Rawling Road in Gateshead. It was a cosy home that she shared with a co-worker. Gateshead is an area known for its cultural diversity. It was an ideal place for a young, vibrant woman like Alice to be. With her natural beauty, sense of humour and friendliness, Alice was bound to attract a fair share of suitors. In October of 2015, Alice entered into a relationship with a man named Treeman or Harry Dillon. Dillon was a soldier based at Penicuik, south of Edinburgh. This was about 120 miles away from where Alice lived. The two enjoyed their first weeks together in an online relationship. This was because, at that point, Dillon was in Afghanistan for the military. In January of 2016, Alice and Dillon met in person for the first time after their whirlwind online romance began. Dillon was able to make the trip because he was on a short period of leave, and he then returned to the UK permanently in April of 2016. Shortly thereafter, Alice's friends began to notice changes in her behaviour. Alice lost weight and was no longer happy and outgoing. She became withdrawn and kept to herself. This was a stark contrast to her normal habits of socialising with others. Her family became concerned about how unhappy she appeared, and even her work performance was beginning to suffer. Alice's world had changed because of Dillon's criticism of every aspect of her life. This included her appearance and her friends and family. He demanded that she focus all of her attention on him. Alice's friends and family became concerned with how Dillon contacted her so frequently, and they could now see that he seemed to be in control of her every move. The relationship between the couple had a lot of ups and downs. Some days everything seemed great between the two of them, while other days were filled with problems and arguments. As their relationship continued, Dillon often demanded to know what Alice was wearing. He wanted to know where she was going, and which people she would be seeing and when. If she didn't respond to his messages quickly enough for his liking, he would start contacting her friends and family, urging them to ask her to respond to him. Occasionally, Dillon would drive almost 2 hours from his barracks just to show up unannounced at whatever place he knew Alice would be at. During this time when Alice had become even more withdrawn, and as her friends were more and more worried about her, a woman reached out to Alice to tell her that Dylan was on a dating website, and that he was pursuing other women romantically. As proof, this woman sent Alice screenshots of the messages that Dylan had been sending to her. Alice quickly broke off her relationship with Dylan when she heard of this infidelity. This, to all intents and purposes, was the perfect out. Dylan, however, denied he was talking to other women. He even tried to make Alice feel guilty for not believing him. Despite his apparent relationships with other women, Dylan was not prepared to let Alice go. With his control of Alice slipping away from him, he attempted to win her back. For weeks, he sent Alice a barrage of texts and emails. He called her relentlessly, and he even continued to speak with her friends and family. He sometimes sent her more than 100 messages a day. Occasionally, he was sobbing uncontrollably throughout the voice messages that he sent to her.
Alice, please. Please, I can't do it. Alice, please call me back. Please. I just want to speak to you. There's nothing else. I don't even know if you're getting these voice messages, but please, can you call me back? Thank you.
The tone of his messages often changed quickly. Some were contrite and begging, while others were hostile and menacing. The intent, however, was always the same. Dylan wanted Alice back. No matter how many times he tried to contact her, Alice expressed no interest in rekindling her relationship with her ex-boyfriend. In the beginning, she tried to politely let him know that she had moved on. But after the messages escalated, Alice began ignoring Dylan's calls and texts. His obsession with Alice continued, however. He hacked into her social media accounts. This was so that he could keep track of where she was and who she might be talking with at any given moment. When Dylan learned that Alice had started a new relationship with another man, he tried to sabotage it by contacting her new love interest and lying about her. It's unknown if these lies worked. The stalking continued, however, and on September the 30th of 2016, Dylan went to Alice's home, ringing the doorbell numerous times. When she looked through the peephole and saw him standing there, she decided not to answer. Eventually, though, he went to the back garden of Alice's ground floor flat. He then began knocking on the back window. After opening the curtain, she saw Dylan walking away. He had left behind chocolates and flowers, especially for her. While he made the trip home, he left another message for her. In this message, he said,
"After we spoke and you didn't want to speak, well, you didn't want to call me again, so that's why I decided to come down. Give you flowers and chocolates. Now I'm on my way back. If you want to take it, you can take it. If you want to bin it, you can bin it. It's completely up to you. I just wanted to do something just to say I'm sorry and show that I really am sorry. And yeah, that's the least I could have done. But I know you're not going to come out in front of me and speak to me, so that's why I left it there. If you ever want to speak to me, it'll be good. If you don't, there's nothing I can do. Anyways, sorry for waking you up. Hope you have a good night's sleep. Bye."
That scary message prompted Alice to reach out to Northumbria Police.
Evening, Northumbria Police. Chris, how can I help you?
Hi there. I just need a bit of advice, really, more than anything. So I split up with my boyfriend about 3 months ago. Since then, I know that he's hacked into my Facebook and also my phone. He's been sending me a lot of messages, even though I've asked him not to contact me. And basically, like, just messaging my friends and things. And then tonight, he's, well, I had a knock at my door. And, well, he'd sent me a message saying I've been in the garden since 5. I had a knock at my door. And then when I went and looked, I've got like a little, you know, the thing that you can look through. And there was no one there. And then it happened again 2 or 3 times. And then he's come round the back, knocked on my bedroom window at the back of my flat, ground floor flat. He's been outside and he's like left some flowers and chocolates on the outside windowsill, and he walked off. He's not done anything, but I'm concerned. I've been putting off, my friends have been telling me to call the police. I've been putting it off, but I just feel a bit shaken up tonight. So.
Well, it can be classed as harassment.
Yeah.
Which is a crime.
Yeah.
If you do any contact from him, there's a number of things you can do.
Yeah.
You could go to a solicitor and take out an injunction.
Yeah.
Keep him away from you.
Yeah.
Or report it directly to the police now, and we can issue him with a PIN notice, which means if he ever comes near you again or contacts again, he'll be arrested.
Okay.
So which would you prefer?
Can I try that option, please?
Yeah, of course you can. And your name, please?
Oh, sorry, it's Alice.
What's he called?
Well, his name's Harry Dillon, but he's got a seat name, which is Trimon. He lives in Edinburgh.
He lives in Edinburgh.
Yeah. So he's driven down.
So he's constantly contacting you by phone or text or?
Yeah. Well, I've blocked his number. He's got 2 phones. I've blocked both numbers. So he's been sending me Gmail messages. I haven't blocked him off Gmail because I don't want him to start emailing my work email. Then he's also made a fake Snapchat account to try and contact me on.
We'll need to get the Edinburgh police to go and serve him with a PIN notice.
Okay.
But, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if we can make an appointment to come and see you.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Yeah.
And we'll get the details.
Thank you.
Alice seemed almost embarrassed to contact the police about the behaviour of an ex-boyfriend. While a police information notice may sound intimidating, it carries essentially no consequences if broken. They are handed out to people who police believe may have done something wrong, but something that they can't be arrested for, such as allegations of harassment. But the fact that Dillon would be told by the police to stop contacting her did give Alice a sense of comfort. She believed her ordeal might finally be ending, and now she could finally get on with her new life without her ex-boyfriend pursuing her. Dillon, who was still living at the military barracks near Edinburgh, was contacted on October the 3rd by the police about the police information notice. However, he wasn't arrested nor was he detained. While the police did speak with Dillon's superior, they did not contact the police in Scotland or the military police. Several people who knew Dillon and had heard about the police information notice told him to stop all contact with Alice. But instead of listening to that advice given by his colleagues, within days, Dillon sent Alice a package containing a letter and other items that reminded him of her. In the letter, Dillon said he would no longer be in Alice's life. It turns out the police information notice hadn't seemed to discourage Dillon from contacting Alice. Instead, it appeared to have made him angry. When Alice received the letter, some of her loved ones urged her to contact the police again, to tell them that the contact and harassment hadn't stopped. So Alice contacted the police for a second time.
Sorry, good evening, Northumbria Police. Jeff speaking, how can I help?
Hi there. I've been in touch with the police. Somebody's been issued with a PIN so that they can't contact me. However, I've had a letter off them.
So you're reporting the breach of the PIN?
Yeah.
Who was it from?
Harry Dillon.
What was the content of the letter? Was he...
So pictures of me and him, because he's my ex-boyfriend, so a notebook that I'd sent him when we were together and a letter.
Okay, what was the nature of it? Was it threatening or was it harassing? Or?
No, not threatening. It's just saying that he knows I called the police on him and he's had everything confiscated and all he has to himself is a pen and paper and an iPod, and explaining why he came down last Friday. And then it says at the bottom he won't contact me, this will be the last I hear from him, but he's said that a lot of times and he never does seem to stop.
So do you want to call back to discuss this?
Yeah, what's usually what happens with it?
Okay, well, I'll let them know you want someone to contact you back. Just discuss what can be done.
Okay. Will it be the police officer that's been dealing with my case?
I can't guarantee who it'll be. I'll let them know you've got your pin notice there, so it's going into a breach of it.
Okay.
Is the best time to phone you back?
Any time really will be fine.
The police call handler asked Alice to determine whether she wanted the police to arrest Dylan. This was instead of automatically arresting him for contacting her again, even after he had disregarded the instructions of the police information notice. Trying to be a nice person and not wanting to ruin Dylan's career, Alice said that she didn't want to have him arrested. She later made a comment to a loved one that she was palmed off by the authorities. Alice was frightened and convinced that Dylan would continue to stalk her. She thought there was nothing anyone could do to prevent it. To try and protect herself, Alice began taking precautions. She would have a work colleague drive her home every day, and then she would lock her door as soon as she entered her flat. On October the 12th, 2016, Dylan made the long drive to Alice's flat and parked near it, sitting there. He was simply biding his time until she returned. As he sat, he sent messages to another woman he was trying to meet up with later that same night. After Alice had returned, Dylan entered her flat by breaking into her rear window at around 6 p.m. He grabbed a sharp implement from her kitchen and cornered Alice in the bathroom. Alice fought valiantly for her life against this trained soldier. But ultimately, Dylan used the sharp implement against Alice, and there in her own flat, she drew her final breath. An amazing and promising life cut short in an instant. Dylan fled from the scene, and Alice was found deceased a short time later by her flatmate, Maxine. Maxine immediately contacted the Northumbria police to tell them what had happened to Alice. This is part of that real call.
Please, I've just come back to my flat and the door was locked, so I crawled through the window and my flatmate's covered in blood in the bathroom.
Is she breathing?
I don't know, I can't look, I'm sorry.
Okay, try and stay calm.
Alice! 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 Oh my God, she's dead.
And yet the door was open?
No, it wasn't open, it was locked, and I've crawled through my window that was open in the back door, and she's lying covered in blood. She's blue.
Can you have a look and see if she's breathing for the ambulance?
She's not.
She's not breathing?
No, she looks, no.
Where's the blood from?
It's everywhere, I don't know, her leg looks broken, everything.
Say that again, sorry.
Her leg looks broken, everything, I don't know. Alice,
how much blood is there?
There's lots, it's everywhere. It looks like she was in the shower, everything's been knocked over, it looks like she's been attacked. Please help.
Things have been tipped over in the bathroom?
Yes, and everything looks a mess, like she's not breathing, she's actually blue, please. I mean, knew this was coming, her ex is an absolute psychopath.
Say that again, sorry.
She put in a complaint in about her ex and she phoned 101 at the weekend to report that he's trying to get in contact and he says we're going to do nothing now, this has happened.
Right, who tried to contact her at the weekend?
No, she's contacted 101 because she put in a statement about him 2 weeks ago. And
about who?
Her ex-boyfriend, Harry Dillon.
Right, so she been having problems with her ex?
Yes.
So do you think that's what it is?
Yeah, I can hear the police are coming.
Yeah, they're saying they're at scene. I'll wait with you until they're actually with you.
Thanks to Alice's prior calls to the police about Dylan's troubling behaviour and the additional information that was supplied by flatmate Maxine, the police quickly zoomed in on Dylan as a main person of interest. The police began searching for him right away. They found him just a few hours later after the attack. When he was located, he was trying to leave his barracks by scaling a wall. This was even though he claimed to know nothing of Alice's passings when he was found. The investigation into the incident, however, told a very different story to his. A medical examination revealed Alice's body had many bruises, as well as wounds located on her hands. These were determined to be from her trying to defend herself, bravely fighting for her life. In addition, forensic evidence tied Dylan to the scene. Alice's blood was found on the steering wheel of his car and on his bracelet. Dylan's story quickly changed when he realized there was a lot of evidence against him. Evidence that linked him to the scene, and evidence that he had repeatedly threatened Alice. Even with the evidence mounting against him, Dylan was still determined to dodge any blame for the crime during his trial.
Alice Ruggles was found at her home address in Gateshead and she'd been murdered. Okay. Did you murder Alice?
No, I did not murder Alice.
Do you have any knowledge of this?
No, I don't have any knowledge of this.
Were you present when this murder occurred?
No, I wasn't.
I've been told exactly what happened to her. And how you cut her throat.
No comment.
Are you looking back? Are you? Do you remember what happened?
No comment.
Do you remember what you did? Do you remember how bad it was? Do you remember the blood spraying? I'm being told that you suffered. She must have known what was happening. Because she didn't die straight away.
You've got 4 tiny little scratches on your face. Her throat is slit open through the voice box.
Sarah, you for 2 days, showing no remorse whatsoever.
You said you loved her. You didn't love her. You thought if you can't have her, no one else can have her. That's exactly what you thought, because she doesn't want you. Is that the truth?
No comment.
Why are you no commenting now? Because you're guilty. How can you do that to someone you love? Because you're jealous, possessive, controlling, stalker, murderer.
He concocted an unlikely scenario to avoid spending any time in prison. He said that she threatened him with a sharp implement, and she was therefore accidentally cut by it when they were arguing. But the forensic evidence did not support Dylan's versions of the events, especially when it was factored in that he was much taller and heavier than she was. It was also determined that Alice had 24 injuries on her body. Further evidence showed Dylan's footmark on the bathroom door. This was an indication that he had fought his way into the bathroom where Alice was hiding from him. In his court trial, Dylan did not display any emotion about Alice's passing. Other evidence came to light which cast doubt on Dylan's tale. It came out during the trial that he had driven to Alice's house on October the 10th, and whilst there he had taken a picture of the bathroom window at the back of her flat. That showed the jury that he had ill intent towards Alice, and that he had planned his actions ahead of time. The jury also learned that Alice wasn't the first person that Dylan had stalked and verbally harassed. Before he began dating Alice, he dated a woman named Nico Nemeth. When she broke things off with him, he tracked her down. He spat at her and called her degrading names. The police were subsequently notified, and Dylan received a restraining order. This required him to stay away from Nemeth for 1 year. Unfortunately, Alice had known nothing about Dylan's inability to move on. His romantic relationships ended, but he refused to accept it. Alice didn't know that Dylan had handled rejection so badly in the past that another woman was forced to protect herself against him. In the end, the jury didn't believe Dylan's story about Alice allegedly attacking him. Although the guilty verdict was a big relief to Alice's parents and other family members, they realised that there were other women who were dealing with situations like Alice had. Looking back to their first meeting with Dylan, her parents said that they saw nothing in his behaviour that would have suggested he would later become violent towards their daughter. They also understood that their daughter may have survived if police officers did more to help women who are being stalked. While they couldn't bring Alice back, they hoped they could implement changes that could someday save other young women. Working with the police, they helped develop a protocol for processing stalking and harassment allegations. Alice's parents started a trust in which they could teach others about the threat of stalking and help other women who may be in danger. Dylan was found guilty and he was sentenced to a minimum of 22 years in prison. This case is so crazy, it's almost unbelievable. I have brought you over 130 cases on this channel so far, so I am kind of hard to shock. But this one shocked me. You have been warned. Peter Bryan was born in London in 1969 to two immigrant parents from Barbados. They moved over to England in the 1950s. They were simply looking for a better life for their children. Peter was the youngest of 7 siblings. Their parents worked every single day of the week. That meant that Peter and his other siblings were tended to by minders. Peter's mother was especially absent. She spent large stretches of his childhood in Barbados with her older children who had not crossed over during the move. Because he didn't get the direct attention and care that he required, Peter grew up living largely unchecked. At Shaftesbury Junior School in Forest Gate, he developed an appetite for bullying boys who were physically smaller than him. He would take their lunch money, call them names, and generally demean them. There's a record of him making children his age tie his shoelaces. Peter struck wherever he saw weakness, and this was only exacerbated when he became a teenager. He joined a street gang at a young age and started smoking illicit substances at age 12. Experts think that the early substance use severely hampered his mental development. This could have been a contributing factor to his later psychosis. There's also a record of mental illness in the family, so there could be a genetic component to it as well. Peter's attitude grew worse when he entered Trinity Secondary School in Canning Town. Teachers reported that he seemed to get a sadistic kick out of dominating people and crushing their spirits. He also robbed people, touched girls inappropriately, heckled people, and even slapped a female teacher. Peter only got a suspension for that transgression. He managed to remain in high school until he was 15 years old, and that was when he dropped out, something that wasn't unusual at the time. It was a combination of being dyslexic and requiring a tutor to learn, a general disdain for the school and its people, and his desire to live by his own rules. From this point, things would take a radical and tragic turn for Peter, as well as those unfortunate enough to catch his eye. In 1987, at 18 years old, Peter Bryan had his first run-in with the police. He lived at the Flying Angel Custom House in East London, and he worked at a clothes stall on a market. The police received a call when he attempted to throw another resident off of the 6th floor window. According to the victim, the attack was entirely unprovoked. This hinted that Bryan was perhaps suffering from some type of psychotic episode. His actions weren't based in our reality. Ultimately, the police took no action against Bryan, and perhaps if they had, they would have stopped what came next. Although you've probably never heard of this man before, Peter Bryan goes on to become one of the most terrifying criminals of the 21st century. But for his monstrous pedigree, he grew up in a fairly ordinary place. East London in the 1970s and 80s was wildly different from what it is today. But the highlights of the city have remained the same throughout the generations. It is the capital and largest city of England and the United Kingdom. It houses a diverse population of 8 million people. At its centre is the Houses of Parliament, Big Ben and Westminster Abbey. Nisha Sheth was a 20-year-old college student. They were the oldest child of the Sheth family. She had a 12-year-old smart-mouthed brother and worked for her parents to support herself while she attended university. The Sheths were an affluent Indian family. They owned multiple fashionable Kings Road boutiques scattered throughout London. After a brief stint at the clothes stall and then teaching cooking classes in a soup shelter, Bryan landed one of the best jobs of his adult life. He worked as a shop assistant to Nisha. Nisha always found Bryan more than a little bit strange and frankly intimidating at times. He was a large, heavy-set man, and he made a habit of invading her space. He would touch her inappropriately and then go on long protracted speeches. He would mutter about things that nobody else understood. The first few months of working with Peter were decent enough, but over time his personal hygiene, personality and mind seemed to deteriorate. He would change his appearance and hairstyles frequently, fully bearded on one day, clean shaven the next. It was also an open secret that Bryan was a local delinquent. He bragged about how he had mugged girls like Nisha, how he had extorted people, and how he had sold illicit substances. Bryan did whatever he could to supplement his income from the shops, income which he often blew through by buying illicit substances. Nisha was not the only person who saw the sort of danger Peter presented. Her mother saw it too. Mrs. Sheth noticed Peter was erratic and, at some point, started walking around with a claw hammer which he'd stolen from their tool shed. On one occasion, he even told her that he wanted to kill somebody, but given his eccentricities, she didn't know what to believe. Towards the end of his stay with the Sheths, he even struck her on the shin with his belt. When Mrs. Sheth reported Peter's behaviour to her husband, he simply did not believe her. Peter treated him with respect and fairly whenever he saw him, and this meant that he grew to like him. Although he often disappeared from work for days to weeks at a time, Mr. Sheth was still willing to give him another chance. That choice would soon come to cost him everything. Bryan's infatuation with Nisha Sheth was no mystery. He'd made his intentions obvious, and on one occasion he brought Nisha a nail box with flowers inside. When Nisha's brother noticed the sticker on the side and asked him where he'd stolen them from, Peter swallowed the sticker to hide the evidence and laughed off the entire interaction. Shortly after this, Nisha reported Bryan for stealing clothes from their shop. She'd caught him in the act one day and told her father about it immediately. Peter felt betrayed and showed up at the store 1 week later. It was now March the 18th, 1993. He had a claw hammer in his hand. He went after Nisha's 12-year-old brother, knocking him to the side. He then assaulted Nisha, who was on the phone at the time. The police report said that he hit her so hard that the white of her brain was visible. Nisha's brother watched it all happen. Bryan then fled the scene of the crime when he realised what he'd done. A random bystander noticed something was wrong and chased after him. Bryan managed to lose them before climbing onto the roof of a building. He was high on illicit substances and trying to throw himself off. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, his survival instinct kicked in. He grabbed hold of one of the ledges of the building as he climbed down. Eventually though, his grip failed him. He then plummeted several floors, shattering both of his ankles. Bryan claimed diminished responsibility. He was sentenced to Rampton Secure Hospital indefinitely after he admitted to the murder of Nisha. This was much to the protest of the Sheth family. They wanted a stricter sentence for Bryan, but psychologists determined that he was mentally ill. He said he was convinced that Nisha was teasing him, and she had demanded that he kill her. In 1994, Bryan was sent to Rampton Secure Hospital. There, he did make considerable progress according to the nursing staff, but he did still have occasional hiccups. There, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was reported to have been initially violent, but he then settled down into the institute. Every once in a while, though, his mental health deteriorated, and Bryan was caught doing alarming things. Whilst inside, he claimed to have gotten a kick from Nisha's death, and it seemed that he misremembered the event. He also threatened nurses with violence when he didn't get his way on several occasions. Eventually though, Bryan managed to get a handle on his outbursts. In time, he masked his psychopathic tendencies so well that his doctors were convinced he was better. In 2001, just over 7 years after the death of Nisha, Bryan was transferred to the care of a social worker and psychiatrist. Both of these people, unfortunately, had very little experience with killers like Bryan. He was moved to Riverside Hostel in London. This is a minimum security men's facility in northeast London. There, Bryan was free to come and go as he pleased, and he did behave himself for the most part, but he was caught smoking illicit substances and tested positive for amphetamines more than once. Things quickly escalated once more when Bryan assaulted a 17-year-old girl by blowing raspberries on her stomach. The police were called in, but nothing ever came of the matter. Bryan admitted to this crime of his own free will, and he was subsequently transferred to Newham Hospital's open ward for his safety after the girl's family threatened him with violence. In Newham, Bryan was once more free to come and go as he pleased. At this point, it had been 11 years since any significant violent incident had happened. He was seen as recovering, as safe, and a poster child for mental health and prison reform. It was during this time that he met a woman who introduced him to Bryan Cherry. Everyone that knew Cherry described him as a kind-hearted loner, but someone who would let other people take advantage of him instead of being alone. Nicola Newman was the name of the woman who introduced Cherry to Peter. She was an addict who would show up at Cherry's house every so often to hang out and to take money from him. The depth of Peter and Bryan's relationship was only known to the two of them, but it must have been fairly intimate for him to choose Cherry out of everyone that he had encountered. Peter headed over to Bryan Cherry's flat in Walthamstow on February the 17th, 2004. He was armed once more with a claw hammer, a screwdriver, and a Stanley knife. He arrived at Cherry's at 6 p.m. He then attacked him with the hammer. He struck him 24 times, but didn't stop there. Peter proceeded to dismember Bryan with the knife and the screwdriver that he brought with him. He cut around the arm joints before applying considerable pressure to dislocate the joint and extract it. Peter Bryan then removed part of Bryan Cherry's brain. He dropped it in a frying pan with some clover butter, and he placed another portion of it in a sieve by the kitchen sink. The fried portion was then consumed. At around 7:15, Nicola Newman let herself into Cherry's flat. As one of his only friends, she had a key to his apartment. She was stunned when she noticed the strong smell of disinfectant coming from deep within the house. It was then that Bryan emerged from the living room, bare-chested and sweaty, holding a sharp implement. When Nicola asked him where Bryan Cherry was, he asked her to leave. She, however, persisted with her questioning, and it was then that Peter Bryan said, "Bryan is dead." Naturally, Nicola didn't believe him and walked past him to look deeper into the flat. To her utter horror, she found Bryan Cherry unclothed and deceased on the floor. Immediately, Nicola understood just how precarious her situation now was. Slowly and calmly, she exited the apartment and told Peter that she needed to leave. She ran for her life when she was clear from the flat, and then placed a call to the police to report this heinous crime. The police arrived at a scene that they'll go on to discuss in therapy for years to come. They found Peter Bryan waiting for them in the hallway. He was stood in the dark with his blood-stained hands, jeans and trainers. In the kitchen, they saw what remained of Bryan's feast, and the tub of clover that he'd used to fry it in. They noticed that the meat had pieces of bone, skin and hair still attached to it. When they saw what was left of Cherry's head, they immediately put two and two together. Peter Bryan declared to their utter horror, "I ate his brain with butter. It was really nice." He later added upon his arrest, "I would have done something else if you hadn't come along. I wanted their souls." Considering that Peter Bryan was found covered with red fluids, and with the objects that he used to end Bryan Cherry within reach, there was still a surprising amount of investigating to be done. The analysis by the pathologist showed just how sick Peter still was, and how adept he'd been at covering it up for all these years. The severed left leg was partly sawn and partly fractured. At the top of the left, the muscle had been completely divided, and superficial sawing of the bone had commenced. These were the words of the pathologist. They concluded that Bryan was most likely interrupted before he could complete the amputation of the leg, and Peter Bryan later admitted as much when he was interviewed. He said, "I used the Stanley knife to cut them off, and some other kitchen knife, but I had to stomp on them to break the bone." The investigators discovered that both Bryan's psychiatrist and social workers did not have the experience or background to manage someone as manipulative and dangerous as he was. The social worker lacked any mental health training, and the psychiatrist had Bryan as his first patient. The case of Peter Bryan revealed a systemic issue within the justice system. It showed how the system could be manipulated for the benefit of people like Peter. Unfortunately though, the case of Peter Bryan does not end here. After his arrest, he told authorities that he wanted to kill again, and that is exactly what he did. He was sent to Pentonville jail. There he told one member of staff that he wanted to end him, and he told another that he wanted to eat his nose. During his entire stay at that jail, he had to be minded with riot gear. He was later transferred to Broadmoor Maximum Security Hospital in April of 2004. There they could watch and manage him better. However, his minders made the crucial mistake of transferring him to a minimum security risk ward. Again, they thought he'd settled down. Richard Loudwell was a 60-year-old man awaiting trial for the murder of an 82-year-old woman. He had allegedly violated and throttled her. This earned him the universal ire and hatred of everybody at the hospital, and Bryan felt the exact same way. On April 25th, 2004 at 6:10 p.m, two members of staff heard two loud bangs coming from the dining room. They found Mr. Loudwell lying on the floor next to a table. His face was covered in red vital fluids and there were marks on his neck. Somebody had throttled him with the cord from their trousers and had struck him on the head. He died of bronchopneumonia caused by severe brain injuries on June 5th. When Peter was found, he confessed to the murder almost instantly. He said, "I get these urges, you see. I've had them ever since I saw him. He's at the bottom of the food chain, old and haggard. He looked like he'd had his innings. I just waited for my chances to get at him. I wanted to kill and eat him. I didn't have much time. If I did, I'd have tried to cook and eat him." When asked if he thought eating people was normal, he replied, "Of course, it's normal. Cannibalism is normal. It's been there for centuries. If I was on the street, I'd go for someone bigger, for the challenge. I wanted to cook him, but there was no time." On March 15th, 2005, Judge Giles Forrester served Peter Bryan with 2 life sentences after he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder, but with diminished responsibility. The trial took place at the Old Bailey. Several witnesses were called forward by the prosecution. They wanted to give the jury a more comprehensive understanding of who Peter Bryan actually was. Decorated psychiatrist Dr. Martin Locke had the displeasure to carry out a series of interviews with Bryan, and he declared him the most dangerous man I have ever assessed. Bryan told the doctor, "You look like a brainy chap, and you're quite slim. I think I could take you." Bryan also described his second victim's limb as tasting like chicken. Coroner Peter Bedford described Bryan as chillingly manipulative. Judge Forrester had this to say before he gave the sentence: "You killed on these last 2 occasions because of a thrill and the feeling of power it gave you when you were flesh." Deemed too dangerous, Peter was sedated even during his trial, and he was escorted by several of Broadmoor's largest nurses. He is being held there indefinitely. even after Lord Chief Justice Phillips overturned the whole life tariff in 2006, turning his sentence to 15 years minimum. Considering the crimes Bryan committed and his mental state, it is highly unlikely he will ever be released to the public ever again. The mental health system is even harder to escape than jail.
This is my gear, and I point this around. See?
Some young souls are born to be free, much like a wild bird held captive in a cage. Even if you love them, if you want what's best for them, you will have to let them go. But what if the captor refuses to do so? They could either hold on to them, or make sure nobody else could have them. This is the infuriating case of Zuzu Virk. Just like small towns all across America, Alpine, Texas is known for its peace and tranquility. With a population of just over 5,000 people and its geographic location within the world's largest dark sky reservation, Alpine is a perfect destination for those wishing to lay back, relax, and gaze upon the wonders of the universe on a calm, clear night. It was the beautiful terrain and wildlife that drew 21-year-old Zuzu Virk to the small West Texas town, words she had written herself. Named after the character Zuzu Bailey from the timeless Christmas movie It's a Wonderful Life, Zuzu Virk was every bit as whimsical and free-spirited as her namesake, with a personality that fills the room. By the way, I absolutely love this name. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. A biology major at Sul Ross State University at the time of her disappearance, Zuzu was born on April 22, 1995 to Glenn and Lori Virk in Keller, Texas. After graduating from Timber Creek High School in her native Keller, Zuzu moved to Alpine during the 2014-2015 school year. Zuzu was kind of quirky and artsy and a lover of the outdoors. She became an unofficial daughter to the community, Lori Virk said in a statement to one news outlet. She was described by one friend as comforting. Zuzu always knew the right things to say. She could cheer anyone up. Another acquaintance called her a sassy star child who made Alpine home for me. Zuzu was well known in her adopted hometown of Alpine, where she lived with her brother Miles. He himself mentioned that she was the best sister you could ever have. Whilst a student at Sul Ross, Zuzu worked with the Borderlands Research Institute and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. For her outstanding efforts while attending the university, Zuzu was named on the Dean's List. Independent and outgoing, Zuzu had applied for a transfer to Texas A&M University on the very week that she vanished, hoping to continue her studies and eventually move on to Japan. While in Alpine, Zuzu had met a man named Robert Fabian. 4 years her senior, by all accounts, Robert was deeply in love with Zuzu. In fact, according to Miles Zirk, he had thought that Robert loved her more than she loved him. But he was also known to be extremely jealous and was described by one peer as being all consumed by the thought of Zuzu leaving the Alpine area. Robert was described by Zuzu's mother Lori as being tall, dark and handsome, but with an attitude, saying he was arrogant, manipulative and all about Robert. Mother Lori last spoke with Zuzu on October the 10th, 2016. Zuzu told her mother that she was planning to tell Robert about her plans to transfer to Texas A&M, approximately 500 miles away from Alpine, which would be a final way of breaking off the on-again, off-again relationship. But several days went by without any contact from Zuzu to Lori, something one of Zuzu's best friends, Adriana Doggett, would call shocking. The family were normally very close. The distraught mother went so far as to text Zuzu saying, "Please tell us you're alive," as more and more time passed since she had been in touch with her daughter. In a desperate attempt to locate her child, Lori contacted Robert, who claimed he was giving her space and had not seen her. But after her urging, he finally contacted police to perform a welfare check on the young student. However, Robert failed to mention that he had dinner with Zuzu to her mother before she vanished. But after being told about the dinner by Zuzu's friend, Lori Virk found this to be very suspicious. So when Zuzu Virk was officially reported missing on October the 4th, 2016, it was not a matter of if but when her boyfriend Robert Fabian would become a person of interest in this case. Officials and community members began a series of searches for the missing girl. However, one resident who was notably absent was boyfriend Robert Fabian. Robert now told investigators that on the evening in question, he had invited Zuzu over for a romantic dinner date. They shared a meal and some champagne, but when Robert mentioned his ex-girlfriend in conversation, he claimed Zuzu became angry and left his apartment somewhere around 2 to 3 a.m. He then told the interviewing officer, Captain Darrell Lasoya, that when Zuzu had stopped responding to his messages, he simply assumed she needed space. Until he received a distraught text message from Laurie indicating she hadn't been able to contact her daughter either. Robert told the officer that Zuzu wanted to continue on a friends with benefits type relationship rather than anything serious, and he characterized their relationship as a roller coaster. When police questioned Robert's downstairs neighbor, John Franco, he indicated to them that he had seen Robert leave the building at around 4 a.m. alone, and that Zuzu's car was still in the parking lot well into the morning when he left for work after 10 a.m.
You can hear him moving her stuff around, playing music, and then she shows up. They make dinner like at 9, 10. You can smell their food, and you can hear them conversation and then laugh a little bit, and then it got quiet like after 11. We just heard one shut the F up. And that was it.
Neighbour Franco also told police that he could hear arguing, along with what he could only describe as unique noises coming from Robert's bedroom. During a second interview with Captain Lasoya, when notified of what his neighbour had told investigators, Robert recanted part of his previous statement. He now told police that after the argument he had left and gone for a drive, and when he returned to the apartment, Zuzu was still there, and only then left some time after. The police captain made it clear during the interview that he was suspicious of Robert, saying, "You know, I think you're leaving some stuff out." Robert would then consent to a search of his apartment, which turned up a mattress pad and some clothes in the building's laundry, everything stained by bleach. Oddly enough, his bed had been stripped bare with not even a pillowcase left. While interviewing Robert, investigators noted he always spoke of his girlfriend in the past tense, as if he was already aware of what gruesome fate had befallen her. Within 2 weeks of Zuzu Verk being reported missing and the suspicious circumstances piling up against him, investigators named Robert Fabian as a suspect in the disappearance of his girlfriend in a news release on Facebook. The same release also named Robert's best friend, Chris Estrada, as a person of interest. Estrada had known Robert since high school, and the two were in contact often. Phone records indicated that on the morning of October the 12th, Estrada received a call from Robert at 3:15 a.m. Estrada initially tells investigators that he picked Robert up at his sister's later that day to hang out and go to dinner. When he picked up Robert, he claimed his sister asked him to drive him to the Dollar General and to loan him his credit card as he had forgotten his at home. At the dollar store, Robert purchased some plastic painter's drop cloths, which Estrada claimed were used when he helped Robert paint a table at his apartment later that evening. But a statement from Robert's friend, Brittany Gasker, painted a completely different picture. She said Chris Estrada came to her home shortly after he had left Robert Fabian around 12 a.m. on October the 13th. She described him as looking like he'd seen a ghost, and not himself. After asking her friend what was wrong, Chris replied, "I don't want to get you involved. Just don't ask me any questions." Brittany was not aware that Chris had been with Robert earlier that night, and it wasn't until about 5 days later that she learned of Zuzu's disappearance. After speaking to a mutual friend, Josh Kobos, who himself had an eerie conversation with Robert, they both decided they should contact the police to give a statement. Throughout the weeks and months following the disappearance of Zuzu, her family held several press conferences urging the community to not give up searching for their daughter, and even going so far as to make a public plea directly to Robert Fabian to cooperate with the authorities. saying, "Robert, if you love Zuzu, you will come down here and you will help the police bring my sister home," Miles Verk said in a press conference later that October. But as days turned into weeks, and though the police believed they had their suspect, there were simply no more leads to follow and the investigation slowed to a halt. "We didn't hear anything for so long, we all just figured she had passed away," stated Bo Marcotte, a fellow student at Sul Ross State University. That is until February the 3rd, 2017, when a Border Patrol agent named Jared Maynard stumbled upon a ditch in the desert containing human remains. The remains were exhumed and positively identified to be those of Zuzu Verk, wrapped in what appeared to be a plastic painter's drop cloth, much like the ones purchased by Robert Fabian at the Dollar General the day before Zuzu was reportedly last seen. It took investigators less than 24 hours to arrest Robert Fabian and to charge him with tampering with evidence in concealing a human corpse. Chris Estrada was arrested 2 days later in Arizona, charged with the same felony. Chris pled no contest to charges of tampering with evidence in April 2018, with prosecutors recommending leniency for his crimes. Estrada agreed to testify against his best friend, Robert Fabian, a best friend who was now being charged with the first-degree murder of Zuzu Verk.
Lori Verk tells me she's not surprised by Robert's indictment, but rather relieved.
That's what we've thought all along, and I'm very grateful for the grand jury. They've been working on this long and hard, too.
And now she's finally seeing the first steps of justice being served against the man she believes was behind her daughter's disappearance.
This is an opportunity for you to just talk. Zuzu's parents are right here. They just want to know if you have anything to do with it.
The trial began the first week of May 2019. After the initial proceedings, the first 2 days of testimony were largely various witnesses. They included Zuzu and Robert's family and friends recounting their statements to police during their initial investigation. The defense team for Robert Fabian maintained that neither his fingerprints nor DNA were found on any incriminating evidence connecting him to Zuzu's death, and that any evidence presented thus far was purely circumstantial. On the third day of the trial, Chris Estrada was called to testify.
They believe I helped, a cover-up.
And did you?
No. Just hung out and had some drinks. To me, it was a normal day, and I guess now it never will be.
He claimed that his initial recollection of events to investigators was true. However, when the pair returned to Fabian's apartment after dinner, Robert told Chris he needed to speak to him about a life or death matter. According to Chris, Robert explained to him that the dinner had gone well, but at some point things had gotten physical. He said Robert described having his hands around Zuzu's throat when she started to hyperventilate and stopped breathing. At that point, he said he attempted to perform CPR on his girlfriend but could not revive her. She was gone, Robert told his friend, and her body was still laying under the covers in his bedroom. After the confession, Estrada said Robert asked him to help move Zuzu's body from his apartment. According to Estrada, it was then he became worried and left, ending up at another friend's house. After visiting her, he went home and fell asleep. Chris then explained that Robert asked him for assistance in moving the body a second time, saying that he just wanted to get her out. He also asked his friend not to report him to law enforcement. Chris Estrada then testified that although he declined to help his friend move Zuzu's body, he told him that he wouldn't report the crime to the authorities. When asked why he chose not to turn in his friend, Estrada replied, "It was a difficult decision, but at the time, that is what I chose. Today, it would be different." Although commenting on his change of heart and decision to testify, Estrada stated, "At some point, I decided everyone needed some closure." Perhaps as shocking as a testimony of Chris Estrada was that of Roy Roman. He had been Robert's cellmate during his time at Brewster County Jail. Roman claimed that Fabian had explained to him that Zuzu had found out about a bisexual relationship between himself and Chris Estrada, and she was threatening to expose it. At that point, he said Robert told him anger took over. He also told the court that at night he could hear Robert weeping, saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you." Ultimately, Robert Fabian was found guilty of the murder of Zuzu Verk by a jury of his peers. He was sentenced to life in prison for the murder, plus 20 years for the charge of tampering with evidence. For his testimony, which led the way in securing a conviction, Chris Estrada received a sentence of 42 months plus costs on the charges of tampering with evidence. Robert Fabian afterwards appealed the ruling, stating he received ineffective assistance of counsel, and that the court erred in allowing an accomplice witness and jailhouse informant to testify in the trial, among other technicalities. A judge ruled that the guilty verdict in the original case should be upheld, and that all evidence in the case was sufficiently corroborated. Robert Fabian is currently incarcerated in the state of Texas penal system.
I don't know. Okay. I don't think I got all of this. How come your light flashing on the front of that? I don't know.
Rolf Teeter was born in Germany on September the 29th, 1939. He immigrated to the United States with his mother when he was 11 years old. Kay Tidwell was born in Nevada on January the 16th, 1941, to her parents Eugene and Beth Tidwell. Rolf and Kay got married on May the 24th, 1963, in Salt Lake City, Utah, but soon moved to Humble, Texas. The newlyweds were active and devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they had dreams of starting a big family. Unfortunately though, they struggled to get pregnant. Therefore, they adopted their first child, a daughter named Lene. 3 years later, they adopted their son Sean. But within just a few weeks of this adoption, the Teeter family realized that Kay was now 2 months pregnant with a baby girl they named Trisha. At this time, Rolf had been working as a salesman. He was soon able to open his business, Skyline Equipment Incorporated, in Houston, Texas in 1969. The Teeter family owned a remote cabin in Oakley, Utah, a cabin they would visit every year around Christmas. They referred to the cabin as Teeter's Tranquility. This was because it was in such a remote and peaceful location, and they had formed so many fond holiday memories there. In the 1990s, Oakley, Utah only had a population of around 600 people. It was known to be a very, very safe place. In fact, in the previous 100 years, there had only been one violent crime in that area. This was a shooting that was the result of road rage. The Teeter's cabin was located 4 kilometers, roughly 2.5 miles, from the nearest road, so the family could only access it by parking their car on the road and riding a snowmobile to the cabin. So, just like they did every holiday season, the Teeters planned a trip to the cabin in December of 1990. On December the 20th, Kay and Sean flew from Texas to Utah. At the airport, they met up with Kay's sister, Claudia, who was waiting there to give them a ride. Rolf and his 2 daughters planned to fly in the next day and meet up with the others. So Kay, Sean and Claudia drove to the cabin and parked the car. They loaded all of their belongings onto the snowmobiles and then headed to the cabin. When they were around halfway to the cabin, the trio passed a man. They described him as being in his 20s. And only wearing tennis shoes, jeans and a light jacket. This was despite the below freezing temperatures and the rough terrain on the snowy mountainsides. Kay decided to stop and make sure the man was okay, asking if he needed any help. The man didn't even acknowledge them, however. He just walked away without saying anything. Kay, Sean and Claudia didn't think too much of the interaction. They continued up the mountain to the cabin. After unloading their supplies, the 3 had dinner together, and Claudia then decided to spend the night with them in the cabin. The following day, Rolf arrived with his 2 daughters, Lene, who was 22 at the time, and Trisha, who was now 16. Before Rolf and the girls headed up on a snowmobile, Kay told Rolf about the strange interaction with the man the previous day. She asked Rolf if he could bring the shotguns with him when they came. Rolf, however, didn't think this was necessary. He reminded Kay of how safe the area actually was. But Kay insisted and Rolf finally agreed. That same morning, Claudia left the cabin to go into town. There, she planned to do some last-minute Christmas shopping before the family party in a few days. Once the rest of the family arrived to the cabin, they spent their time wrapping presents. They set up the Christmas tree and stockings, and they prepared for the party ahead. But soon, they also went into town to stock up on some more supplies. Once they finished their errands in town and were about to head back to the cabin, Sean decided that he wanted to spend the night at his Aunt Claudia's house. So the family dropped him off before then heading to Kay's mother Beth's home, where the rest of the family would be spending the night. Kay's mother, Beth Potts, was 72 years old at the time. She was said to always be in good spirits. This was despite losing much of her eyesight and a good deal of her mobility after a car accident in 1983. The following day, December the 22nd, at around noon, Kay, Lene and Beth headed back to the cabin. When the trio arrived, Kay noticed a shadow through the master bedroom window. She was excited, thinking her cousin David had arrived to the cabin early to surprise the family. Lene ran inside the cabin to warm up her hands under some hot water. She now noticed the figure inside the cabin, this time from behind the refrigerator. Lene laughed to herself, waiting for her mother's cousin David to pop out from behind the fridge and surprise her. However, it was not David behind the fridge, and the next thing Lene knew, a man with frizzy hair was standing in front of her, pointing a firearm directly at her. The man forced Lene to call her mother and grandmother upstairs, and as Kay helped Beth up the stairs, another intruder appeared. He was described as wearing thick glasses. The second man held a gun to Kay and Beth. Kay pleaded with the men, telling them she would give them anything if they would just let her family live. But without hesitation, the frizzy-haired man turned his gun on Kay. He immediately pulled the trigger. He then did the same to Beth, once in the head and again in the back when she tried to get up. The two men dragged Lene into one of the bedrooms. There, they duct taped a sock into her mouth and tied up her hands and feet. The man with glasses then brought the family dog into the room with Lene. They then went back out to Kay and Beth's bodies. There, they took any jewelry and money that was on them, before then bringing the bodies to the patio and covering them in snow. At around 2:45 that afternoon, Rolf and Tricia arrived at the cabin. When they pulled up, the man with the frizzy hair held a firearm to Lene. They forced her out to the front of the cabin. While the man with the thick glasses held Rolf and Tricia at gunpoint, they forced them to empty their pockets. Rolf gave the man $105 in cash that he had in his pockets, and he pleaded with them to take anything they wanted. The man holding Lene ordered the other to kill Rolf. The man with the glasses cocked his gun, but couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. The man with the frizzy hair then turned his gun to Rolf and attempted to pull the trigger, but his gun didn't fire. He tried another time, and again it didn't go off. But the third time he pulled the trigger, the gun fired whilst it was pointed at Rolf's face. The two men then took the Teeter's gas cans they used to fill up their snowmobiles and poured gasoline all over the cabin. This was their attempt to destroy evidence by setting the house on fire. After covering the cabin in gasoline, the two men went back out to Rolf. One aimed their gun at the back of his head and pulled the trigger, before covering his body in gasoline as well. After setting the cabin on fire, the men instructed Lene and Tricia to load their stolen valuables onto the snowmobiles and drive them down to the road. This was a location where the family's cars were parked. While the four of them headed back down the mountain, they happened to pass the girls' uncle, Randy. He assumed that the girls knew the two boys with them. Randy waved at them, but the girls ignored him, thinking that if the men knew that Randy was part of their family, they would try to murder him too. Once they got to the family's Lincoln town car that was parked on the road, the men ordered the girls to load the items from the snowmobiles into the trunk. The men told them that they were going to drive the car to New York, and that they would let the girls go once they arrived there. However, understandably, Lene and Tricia did not believe the men. but they also felt that they didn't have any other choice but to go along with their plan. When the four of them got into the car and began driving, they passed the girl's uncle Randy again. He was also driving down the road. He was motioning to the girls and yelling at them to stop, but they continued to ignore him. When the men asked if they knew Randy, the girls maintained that they didn't know him, hoping that this would save his life. Randy, however, could tell something was very wrong. Not long after the girls and their captors passed Randy, a man on a snowmobile started coming towards him. He noticed that the man was not dressed for the below freezing temperatures. He was not wearing a helmet, shoes, or a jacket. He also noticed that the man had injuries to his face. As the man got closer, Randy could see that his face was swollen and crimson. Once the man on the snowmobile caught up to Randy, he got off and started to approach him. That is when he realized that the injured man was his brother, Rolf. Rolf filled Randy in on the events that had just happened. He told Randy that, after he was shot and doused in gasoline, he laid on the ground and pretended to be dead, waiting for the men to leave. Once he heard the snowmobiles leave, he went to the cabin and tried to put out the fire. But he said it was spreading so quickly that he couldn't do it. And in the process, part of his clothing even ended up catching fire whilst he was in there. Randy placed Rolf in the back seat of his car and sped down the road. He was trying to call 911, but the reception was too poor in this remote part of town. His call, luckily though, was eventually able to connect. He then told the 911 operator everything that had just happened. He told them where the girls went, what car they were in, and requested a helicopter for his injured brother. He amazingly managed to get all of this out before his phone died. Randy then pulled into a gas station to use their payphone to call 911 once again. While this was happening, the girls were riding in their stolen car with the men. A police car then passed them and made a U-turn to start following. This made the men nervous and resulted in them starting a high-speed police chase. However, the car eventually spun out and got stuck on a snowbank. Luckily, the two men surrendered to the police without too much issue. Meanwhile, a helicopter managed to get to Rolf and bring him to the hospital. There, amazingly, he was able to recover completely. When the police were able to make it to the cabin, they described the scene as a war zone. Among the mess, they found a videotape that had been recorded by the two killers. This showed how they passed their time in the house before the family returned. Before the Teeter family arrived, the two men had spent some time in the cabin eating food, opening presents and looking for valuables. This is the real footage that they captured themselves with the Teeter family's camcorder.
I don't know. Okay. I don't think I got all of this. How come your light flashing on the front of that? I don't know. Find out. How am I supposed to find out? Where's the instructions? And Lynette. Come on, pass that. Oh, wow. What is it? Baseball card. Okay. Let's see a couple of them. Oh, the football and basketball. Show them this way. Turn them this way. Okay. Next page.
The police were able to identify the perpetrators as 22-year-old Edward Delly. This was the man wearing the thick glasses, and 26-year-old Von Taylor, who was the man with the frizzy hair. The pair met when they were in a halfway house together after being released from prison for unrelated crimes of aggravated burglary and arson. The two left the halfway house before their official release date, and they then hitchhiked to Oakley. This was because Von Taylor's father also happened to own a cabin in the area. They spent the week before the Teeter family's murders burglarizing other houses nearby. They even scoped out the Teeter's cabin on December the 20th. Von Taylor was the man that Kay was suspicious of, the day that she was riding a snowmobile with Claudia and Sean. On January the 22nd of 1991, the two men were arraigned. They were each charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping, aggravated assault, theft, arson, and failure to heed a police signal. Both Von Taylor and Edward Delly pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. 5 months later, Taylor pleaded guilty to the 2 counts of capital murder in exchange for the other charges being dropped. He was sentenced to death for both counts. Edward, however, did not plead guilty and went to trial 2 weeks after Taylor was sentenced. His defense was that Taylor was the ringleader and told Delly what to do. His lawyer supported this defense by showing that Delly refused to kill Rolf when Taylor told him to, and that he tried to comfort Lene by bringing a dog into the room with her. After 12 hours of deliberation, the jury decided that Edward Delly was guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Neither Edward Delly nor Von Taylor knew that Rolf had survived the attack. They were, to say the least, very surprised to see him standing in the courtroom. This case escalates quickly. It follows a butterfly farmer and an interior designer. Sadly, it moves from one betrayal to the next. How and why would a woman known for being successful and caring turn on her stepfather after a lifetime of caring for one another? This is the twisted and twisting case of Jade Janks and Thomas Merriman. A non-profit organisation called Butterfly Farms was established in 2012 in Encinitas, California. Housed in a 3,000 square foot vivarium, it was open to study and preserve native butterflies. Its founder and director Thomas Merriman and his co-founder Pat Flanagan first met in 2011 when they were both leasing spaces on a property in Vista. Soon they decided to become business partners and started selling palm trees. Just a quick note from me, I didn't realise how lucrative the palm tree industry actually was until researching this case. Anyway, back to it. Their partnership eventually led to the purchase of the vivarium, and the rest was history. Pat said that neither he nor Tom had any experiences with butterflies before they met. Tom, according to Pat, was just like anyone who was so caught up with the magic of a butterfly coming out of a chrysalis and then seeing it fly. Despite being an outdoor type of person who was well loved by his community, Tom had always been a pretty private person. He never dabbled in any social media platforms and rarely spoke about his family or his personal life. All that Pat knew about Tom was that he was a divorcee and had a stepdaughter whom Pat had only seen twice in the 9 years they had known each other. Tom and his ex-wife filed for divorce in 2002 and 2006, and on the third attempt in 2008 they separated for good. Third time lucky. However, Tom's stepdaughter, Jade Sasha Janks, maintained a close relationship with him after the split. After the divorce between her mother and stepfather, Jade moved out of their home in her early 20s. However, she later reconnected with her stepfather. She happened to move into a house directly next to Tom's in April 2020. At this time, she was 37 years old. The two even shared a common driveway on South Nardo Avenue. Jade often looked after her stepfather. They regularly saw each other at least once a week. A graduate of San Diego Mesa College and Mira Costa College, Jade was a sought-after interior designer. She owned a boutique interior design and decor studio. Part of her service was being a design concierge. She provided her clients with all the tools they needed for a unique space they could call their home. She had previously worked as a project engineer and as a sales executive. Sometime in December 2020, Tom checked into a medical facility for heart issues. Stepdaughter Jade decided to clean up his apartment a week before his discharge. What happened next would set off a chain of events that would tear both of their lives apart. Whilst tidying, she accidentally bumped his computer. A photo of a woman's chest appeared on the screen as it came alive. To her shock, Jade recognised the image on the screensaver. It was her. Immediately, she went through the computer files and found over 100 more images of her in states of undress. Some of the images were taken when she was just 16, and some were taken during her late teens. The photos included some images that were taken consensually with her former boyfriend. She knew then that the photos must have been stolen from her laptop, as well as SD cards from a missing digital camera. In her own words, Jade described the discovery as the most violating, awful, gut-wrenching feeling she had ever felt, saying that she could not even touch her own skin. Deeply pained by the betrayal, Jade thought of confronting Tom once he was released from the medical facility. Much of her hurt came from the fact that she had always thought of him as a real father. Being a dutiful stepdaughter, Jade was always there to take care of him whenever he was hurt, or when he was feeling under the weather. If he needed a ride to the doctor, she would take the time off work and help him. But as her anger escalated with each passing day, Jade still couldn't bring herself to confront her stepfather. She resorted to keeping a sharp implement by her bed due to growing anxiety. But one of her main concerns was how Tom would react if he found out that she had gone through his computer files. She knew he would not take it well, so she came up with a plan. Jade contacted a person named Alan Roach. Roach was someone that she was told about a long time ago. She believed he could help with security matters. She thought that having Alan help her out could make things easier for her, helping to make her feel safe again. On December the 23rd, the very same day that she found the photos, Jade looked up Alan Roach on Facebook. He was described to her as a fixer, kind of an ominous name. At 10:40 AM, she messaged him on Facebook saying, "Alan, Sam's friend?" He responded, "Is there something I can do for you?" At 10:55 AM, "Not sure, maybe meet for lunch, chat in person." 10:58 AM, "Awkward situation, not sure how to handle." 11:06 AM, Jade referring to her friend, "Sam said if I ever needed help to contact you." 11:08 AM, a response from Alan, "If Sam referred, I am sure I can fix it for you." On the 24th of December, Alan Roach came over to Jade's house. His job was to stand guard outside the bathroom as Jade showered. On December the 26th, she sent a text message to Alan saying, "Hopefully we can figure out a plan, because I imagine you're too busy to watch me in the shower every day." On December the 28th, she sent a text to Alan again saying that she was waiting for the hospital. The message said, "It's time to come up with a plan." Then on December the 30th, "I think it's time to tighten up a plan." Also on December the 30th, Jade sent a text to her friend writing, "I still struggle with moral issues, yet I will never not be looking over my shoulder, so I made the call." Adding, "It means everything you think it means." Later that day, there were more messages to Alan Roach. At 5:27 PM, "My mind is spinning." At 6:46 PM, "I've got a plan." At 6:46 PM, Alan Roach responded, "I need to have a clear mind now that the time is near." At 7:08 PM, he wrote, "There is no room for error." At 7:13 PM, Jade responded, "I've given this some thought. I have an easy solution." A staggering 71 pages of text messages were exchanged between Jade Janks and Alan Roach between December the 30th and December the 31st. At 10:52 AM on December the 31st, Jade took pictures of the photos on Tom's computer with her cell phone. Jade then deleted everything she could find. Later that day, she brought Tom home from the hospital. Alan was supposed to be waiting for her at the house, but he failed to show up. According to Jade, Tom drank whiskey and took a gabapentin pill on the ride back home. He then began to grow groggy, and after they arrived, he fell twice on the ground. This left a scrape on his head and on the back of his hand. Tom was too heavy for her to carry on her own. He was so intoxicated he couldn't stand. So Jade called a friend to help her get Tom back into the car, a 4Runner, with the seats folded down so he could lie comfortably with pillows and blankets. She then drove him back to the medical facility, but upon arrival, the staff refused to let him in due to precautionary measures against the C-19 virus. Despite calling and texting Alan several times that day, he still didn't show up. Instead, he arranged for an associate, a man named Brian Salomon, to be the one to assist Jade. When Brian arrived, Jade instructed him to throttle Tom and then carry him into the house. But Brian refused to get involved and quickly fled the scene. Without anyone to help her, Jade decided to let Tom sleep it off in her SUV in their shared driveway. That evening, Jade went back to Tom's house and poured whiskey over his computer, now taking his hard drive away. The next morning, on New Year's Day, she went out to check on him, but he was cold to the touch. Now panicking, Jade drove to Scripps Hospital in Encinitas to pick up a wheelchair. Tom was still laying in the back of the car. After returning home from the hospital, Jade discovered that Tom was no longer alive. Jade tried to pull Tom into the wheelchair to get him into the house, but his body fell to the ground once more. That was when she decided to pile some cardboard boxes and blankets on top of his body, and she left him in the driveway. Jade was later arrested. However, she posted a $1 million bond and was allowed out with a GPS anklet.
I don't realize it till today. I spend more time with him than I do my kids.
An early morning email informed Pat Flanagan that his partner in the nonprofit Butterfly Farms for more than a decade was killed.
I looked online and I saw all the news articles that had come out within the last 12 hours or so, and I was shocked. It's been so hard because Tom and I have been together 7 days a week for a decade.
During the trial at the Vista Courthouse, the deputy district attorney in his opening statement warned the jury that they might hear some disturbing things about Tom, things that may cause them to dislike him, but reminded them not to judge his character prematurely. He went on to present some of the incriminating messages that Jade had texted to Alan. On the day that Jade picked up Tom from the medical facility, on one of the messages sent at 11:30 a.m, it read, "I just dosed the hell out of him. Stop him for whiskey, then at Dixieland to stall."
When someone says, "I dosed the hell out of him," you would agree with me that that means someone gave another person a whole lot of drugs, right?
I would, but that's not really, I have other messages to other people. It's kind of, I guess it's a poor phrasing.
Later, she texts Alan again with the following messages asking for his help. "It's pretty much done. He's waking up. I really don't want to be the one to do this. I can't carry him alone, and I can't keep a body in my trunk. I'm not strong enough. He is very aware now, and I am on my own. I'm about to club him on the head as he is waking up." Jade's last text to Alan was telling him she was being pulled over. She asked him to lose her number just moments before she was arrested. One of the surprise witnesses, a friend of Jade's, testified against her. He came over to Jade's house on December the 31st at her beckoning after Bryan refused to get involved. When she asked for his help, he declined too. Instead, he reported to the police the following day that Jade phoned him asking for help to get Tom home as he was high on pills. But it subsequently turned out she actually wanted him to get rid of Tom's body. The friend further testified that Jade admitted to choking Tom and suffocating him with a bag. She gave him a handful of pills prior to the attack and asked for the friend to move Tom out of her car and into the house. Apparently, Jade wanted her stepfather to be back in his bed to make it look like he had an accidental overdose. Another friend of Jade testified in the trial that Jade had confided in her about the stolen illicit photos, although she never divulged any plan of retaliation, especially not to this degree. Jade maintained she was innocent throughout the trial. Whilst the prosecution accused her of drugging and throttling Tom, defense attorney Mark Carlos argued that it couldn't have been the case, because there was zero evidence that Jade had actually throttled her stepfather. Instead, the defense lawyer presented to the court the bag of medicines given to Tom before leaving the medical facility. It was said that he was left alone in the vehicle while Jade stopped at the store on the way home. His theory was that Tom could have taken advantage of the moment and ingested some of the pills, unknowing that it was a lethal combination. The defense attorney insisted that the official report stated that Tom's demise was of acute intoxication of zolpidem. This is also known as a sleep aid Ambien, and that nobody could prove it was Jade who gave him the pills. In fact, Tom had a long history of abusing substances due to chronic pain and insomnia. They said his passing was due to poor health and consuming a cocktail of pills. The defense attorney further added that Jade could have been the only person who truly cared about Tom, and while she was hurt by his actions, it didn't mean she wanted to put an end to his life. The defense attorney added, Jade loved her stepfather, Tom loved Jade. Unfortunately, Tom was a troubled individual and he loved her in different ways.
Disturbing and emotional testimony from inside the courtroom today. Jade Jenks testified that she found more than 100 nude photos of herself on her 64-year-old stepfather's computer. She says there was even a slideshow of them.
When I went to clean in his office area, I was kind of wiping things down, and I bumped the mouse on his desktop computer, and it shook the screen awake. And I looked, and there's a picture of female breasts on the screen. And I look, I have a beauty mark on my chest, and I look at it, those are my breasts. So.
Jade Jenks describing the moment she discovered nude photos of herself on her stepfather Thomas Merriman's computer. She says some of the pictures were cropped and divided up into different folders based on her different body parts.
It was the most violating, just awful, gut-wrenching feeling ever. I felt sick. I felt I couldn't even touch my own skin.
On December the 21st, 2022, after deliberation of less than 24 hours, the jury reached a verdict and found that Jade Sasha Jenks was guilty of first-degree murder.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Jade Sasha Jenks, guilty of the crime of murder.
Jade Jenks looked surprised that the jury found her guilty of premeditated murder. She had been out on bail for almost 2 years since her arrest in January 2021.
Jade Jenks could reportedly face a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. The sentencing hearing is scheduled to take place on April the 3rd, 2023. A makeshift memorial for Tom now stands at Butterfly Farms. Friend and business partner Pat plans to honor and remember his beloved friend. This case should never have been able to happen. It reveals an infuriating failure of the justice system, such a catastrophic failure that it triggered the loss of a beloved wife, daughter, friend and colleague. This is the case of Jill Meagher. On the 30th of October 1982, Jill Meagher, then Jill McKeon, was born in Drada, Ireland. Jill was a small-town girl growing up in Termonfeckin, a village with less than 1,600 people. When her father George got a job in Australia, she moved to Perth with her parents and her brother Michael. The new country wasn't a problem for Jill. She was a small-town girl with a big personality. She was really bright, bubbly and so gorgeous, said a school friend. She moved back to Ireland in 1996 to round off her education, graduating eventually from the University of Dublin with a Bachelor of Arts degree. Jill was going places. Anyone who knew her said so. Jill was always a life of the party, always had a smile on her face. She was always full of fun, always had something to say, and she was very intelligent. She met her husband Tom while at university, and the two relocated to Melbourne, Australia, Brunswick to be exact. Jill and Tom got a beautiful apartment on Lux Way. Life was going well. She became a unit coordinator for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, or ABC. There she was considered a rising star. Despite a small 5'1" frame, Jill's personality packed a huge punch. She had a great group of friends at work, and they often took to the town for a few drinks after they finished. The night of September the 21st, 2012 was no different. It was a Friday night. Jill had gone out with a few friends from ABC to the Brunswick Green Bar on Sydney Road. After staying there for a while, they moved on to Bar Etiquette, a short walk away. It was a good night. They They let their hair down, drinks were flowing, and the group were in great spirits. As the night began to wind down, Jill decided to call it a night. She started walking back towards the flat on Lux Way that she shared with husband Tom at around 1:30 a.m. This should have been a 12-minute walk at most. She called her brother Michael on the phone as she walked. It was only a short call. They spoke about their dad. They spoke about what they could get him for his upcoming birthday. Neither of them were aware that this would be the last time that they would speak. Back at the flat, Tom suddenly woke up to realize that he was still alone. His wife was not by his side. Jill hadn't arrived home yet. Checking the time, it was now 4 a.m. And this just wasn't like Jill. Tom went out to search for his wife, but after checking everywhere he could think of and coming up short, he contacted the police. Jill was close to her family, and she was head over heels in love with her husband. She had great relationships with her friends. She wouldn't just stay out all night. Something wasn't right. As the news of her disappearance began to circulate, colleagues from ABC took to Twitter to get the news of her disappearance out. Friends, family and strangers began to put up posters around Brunswick. A Facebook page called Help Find Jill Meagher was set up. Within just 5 days of the Facebook page being launched, it had received over 100,000 followers. On the 24th of September, a discovery was made. It was Jill's bag. It was found on Hope Street, just 7 minutes away from her home. After this discovery, the police weren't so sure that they were simply looking for a missing person anymore. To everyone's dismay, the case was handed over to homicide detectives. The very next day, officers had yet another breakthrough. An employee of the Duchess Boutique, a bridal store on Sydney Road, the same road where Jill and her friends had been that night, handed in some CCTV footage. The footage was less than ideal, largely obscured. It was filmed from inside of the shop, but it was still clear enough to change the course of the investigation in one fell swoop. In the footage, a man in a blue hoodie could be seen walking around suspiciously outside of the shop. The man could be identified as Caucasian. He looked like he was up to no good. 4 minutes later, the same man was back, but this time with Jill. She can be seen talking to him and showing him something on her mobile phone. This was the last known sighting of Jill Meagher. With her phone clearly in her hand, police traced its movements that evening. In the footage, Jill is just a stone's throw away from her home, around 7 minutes. When the police tracked the phone's movement, triangulation shows her phone moving at speed down the freeway. So how does she get from a 7-minute walk away from her flat to being in a car hurtling down the freeway? Police used ANPR cameras to track down cars that were on the freeway at that time. Police then came to a horrifying discovery. They narrowed the cars down to just one that matched the triangulation of the phone, a car registered to a well-known and dangerous offender. 6 days after Jill Meagher vanished, the police made an arrest. On the 27th of September, Adrian Ernest Bailey, aged 41, was arrested at his home in Coburg for the intimate violation and ending of Jill Meagher. He was taken into custody where he underwent hours of interviews and interrogation.
Around 2:30 this afternoon, police arrested a 41-year-old man in the suburb of Coburg. Now that suburb is near the suburb of Brunswick. Now he was taken here to the St Kilda Police Complex, has been questioned all afternoon and all evening. He hasn't yet been charged with any offence, but the expectation is that he will be charged over the disappearance of Jill Meagher.
To the officer's surprise, Bailey confessed to everything. He recalled how he throttled Jill with his bare hands after violating her in a lane just off of Hope Street. 8 hours later at 10 p.m, he led officers to where her body had been left in a shallow grave on Black Hill Road. She was just weeks away from her 30th birthday. An amazing life cut tragically short.
The search for Jill Meagher has come to a tragic end, with her body found in a shallow grave here in Gisborne South, about a 40-minute drive from where she was last seen in Sydney Road, Brunswick. She was buried several metres off the dirt road under a tall leafy tree. Homicide detectives and forensic police have spent several hours examining the scene. It's a very remote area surrounded by paddocks and only accessible by dirt road.
There was another horrifying discovery. Ernest Bailey was on parole when he ended Jill's life. Shockingly, following his arrest, Ernest's solicitor requested a suppression order be in place. This was to ban the publishing of any potentially damaging material about him. The request was granted. The horrifying reasons for the suppression order became quickly apparent. Jill was not Adrian Bailey's first victim. His known crimes date back to 1990 when an 18-year-old Bailey violated a friend of his sister. Just 1 month later, he struck again, attempting to do the same to a girl 1 year younger than himself. 4 months later, he attempted to do it again to another girl he picked up hitchhiking. He was charged and sent to prison in 1991 for these offences, serving just 22 months of a 5-year sentence. He would later admit that he had cheated the system, simply going through the motions of rehabilitation. This man did not want to change. Officially, everyone believed he was no longer a danger to society, but he knew otherwise. And he admitted during a court appearance to forcing himself on another 5 women over a 6-month period in 2001. For this, he was jailed once more for 11 years, but again, he served just 8 years of this sentence before being released in 2010. Clearly, he was a man set in his ways. When being interviewed following his crimes against Jill, he said, "I should be in jail anyway, you know? I shouldn't have been let out last time, simple. And I say that in the hope someone hears that and they don't ever let me out again. How many chances does a person need?" Shockingly, they really were his own words. At 2 a.m. on the 28th of September, Bailey was charged. An hour later, he had an out-of-session hearing that lasted for just 90 seconds. This time, there would be no bail. He was held on remand to await his trial. The gravity of the situation must have been weighing on Bailey. He tried to end his own life whilst in custody. There were still questions that Jill's husband, family and community needed to know. Why Jill? Why that night? Why did he carry out these actions in such a savage manner? He told a psychologist, Professor James Ogloff, that he had attempted to kiss and touch Jill outside of the Brunswick Lane bar. She didn't react the way that he wanted her to, or the way that he expected. Jill stepped back and slapped him across the face. But Bailey wasn't used to being told no. Her response had made his blood boil. He was now enraged. He saw red after she had rejected his advances. He dragged her into a nearby lane and forced himself on her. However, Jill was a fighter, and she knew she was just 400 meters from home. After the assault, she hit him with her mobile phone and threatened to call the police. Bailey, however, responded by throttling her until no longer breathing. He was in too deep and panicking. He drove home, collected a shovel, and then returned to the scene of the crime. He dragged her into his car and drove to Ginzburn South. Here, he dug a shallow grave and attempted to bury her. When the news broke about everything that had happened to Jill Meagher, the community was devastated. Shortly after the body was found, the Australian flag at the ABC South Bank studios was flown at half-mast as a sign of respect. Part of a statement on the ABC website read, Jill was a much-loved member of the local radio family. She was witty, intelligent, and great company. Jill was an innocent victim, a young, vibrant woman with her whole life in front of her. There were visuals, marches, and thousands of bouquets of flowers. They were left both to offer condolences and to try and promote changes for a safer community. But the reaction wasn't all positive. After Bailey had been charged, various Facebook users began to create pages about the case. As some of them were openly hostile towards Bailey, the Victoria Police tried to unsuccessfully have them taken down. This was to prevent any potential jurors being impacted or swayed by social media coverage. Jill's husband Tom also backed these calls to have them removed. Chief Commander Ken Lay condemned Facebook for not taking down the post, saying, "When you see the hatred that's incited on some of these sites, it is very much the antithesis of what we saw yesterday with 30,000 people taking to the streets, saying, let's try and make this a safer and fairer community." On the 5th of April 2013, Bailey pleaded guilty. During a pre-sentence hearing, victim impact statements were read out. The devastation was immeasurable. Her widower Tom said, "What was stolen from us on September the 22nd, 2012 was love, my best friend and my entire world. I think of the waste of a beautiful mind and a brilliant soul. I am half a person because of this crime." During this hearing, Bailey's lawyer said that he understood he deserved a life sentence and that he was remorseful. Prosecutors hit back, arguing that as he attempted to conceal the crime, this proved that he wasn't sorry for his actions. If he was sorry, would he have gone through the troubles of knowingly digging a shallow grave? During this hearing, the suppression order was also lifted, allowing for his extensive history of violence to be revealed. The courtroom at the Victoria Supreme Court was packed out. The public gallery was full. The media was in a full frenzy. Bailey's lawyer had tried to argue that Bailey had borderline personality disorder, that he was an alcoholic who had been intimately violated as a youth. But the judge was having none of it. When sentencing him, Justice Nettle said that Adrian Bailey was a deviant, and that he either ended Jill because she threatened to call the police after he assaulted her, or because the idea of snuffing her out was arousing. I quote, "You were larger and stronger than she, and you used that physical advantage to dominate her. In effect, you dragged her off the street late at night, while she was peacefully going about her business within a stone's throw of her home." Throughout his sentencing, Bailey stared down at the floor, only looking up once his sentence was handed down. For someone that was remorseful, he wasn't great at showing it. On the 19th of June 2013, Adrian Ernest Bailey was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 35 years. Following this high-profile case, Victoria's parole system underwent a massive overhaul. This was directly as a result of what happened to Jill. Dennis Napthine, Victoria's premier, explained, "There is no doubt that the system failed Jill Meagher. Under the changes we've already introduced, the offender would have been back in jail, not on the streets. Our actions are the minimum we can do to try and make sure this never happens again." Phil Hartman began his career as a graphic artist in the 1970s and eventually transitioned into stand-up comedy by the end of the decade.
I gotta keep this straight face or it won't work.
He became a regular performer on the comedy circuit and eventually caught the eye of Lorne Michaels, the creator of Saturday Night Live, a popular American light entertainment show. He joined the cast of Saturday Night Live in 1986 and became one of the show's most versatile and beloved cast members. He was known for his impressions of famous figures such as Bill Clinton, Frank Sinatra, and Ed McMahon. He was a cast member on SNL for 8 seasons from 1986 to 1994. During this time, he was also moonlighting for other projects throughout the entertainment industry. He was a talented voice actor and writer who made significant contributions to the popular animated series The Simpsons. He first joined the show as a voice actor in 1991 and provided the voices for several recurring characters. These included Lionel Hutz, the bumbling lawyer, and Troy McClure, the washed-up Hollywood actor.
You may know me from such self-help videos as Smoke Yourself Thin and Get Confident, Stupid.
Hartman's distinct voice and comedic timing brought these characters to life and made them fan favourites. In addition to his voice acting work, Hartman also wrote several episodes of The Simpsons. He was known for his wit and sharp writing, and his episodes often featured memorable characters and hilarious storylines. Some of his most notable writing credits include Treehouse of Horrors 4, Bart Gets Famous, 6, and Maggie makes 3. Hartman's contributions to The Simpsons were widely appreciated, and he was regarded as one of the most talented and versatile performers in the show's history. His work on the series helped to cement its place as one of the most popular and influential shows of all time. In 1994, Hartman left Saturday Night Live for good to pursue other opportunities in both television and film. He appeared in several films including Houseguest, Jingle All the Way, which by the way is one of my favourite Christmas films, and Small Soldiers. He also provided the voice for several characters in the animated film The Pagemaster. In 1995, Hartman joined the cast of NBC sitcom News Radio. Here he played the character of anchorman Bill McNeil alongside Joe Rogan. The show was a critical and commercial success, and Hartman received praise for his performance. So far, everything looks good. In fact, better than good, I'm sure you'd agree. But now let's take a look at the personal life behind the fame. Phil Hartman and Gretchen Lewis were married from 1970 to 1972. This was Hartman's first marriage and they had no children. Not too much is known about their relationship or why they divorced, but it is widely speculated that their marriage was short-lived and not very significant in the larger context of Hartman's life and career. The two would remain friends. Hartman was then married to Lisa Strain from 1982 to 1985. It was his second marriage and followed his divorce from Gretchen. Not too much is known about Hartman's marriage to Strain either, as the couple kept their relationship relatively private. Lisa said about Hartman, "My sense of Phil was that he was really two people. He was the guy who wanted to draw and write and think and create and come up with ideas, and he was the actor and entertainer, and then he was the recluse." Phil Hartman met Brian Omdahl through a mutual friend in the entertainment industry. The couple eventually fell in love and got married in 1987. According to what he told his family and friends, Hartman had never been happier than he was in the mid-1990s. Together, the new Hartmans had 2 children, a boy named Sean and a girl named Bergen. But Phil's reclusive nature and the disparity in the couple's degrees of accomplishment were creating issues. As time passed, cracks started to appear and Phil started to emotionally retreat, much like he did in his previous 2 marriages. They started the routine of arguing and fighting, apologising and making up, and then fighting once more. And this very much characterised their relationship moving forward. Bryn's explosive temper and sense of jealousy created issues. For instance, Bryn did not appreciate the congratulations letter that Phil's previous wife sent them after their kid was born. After receiving the letter, Bryn sent a letter back to first wife Lisa Strain. This letter is said to have made Lisa Strain's hair stand on end and contained a death threat from Bryn. She recalled the gist of the letter's contents, saying, "The gist of it was, don't ever get near me or my family or I will hurt you. I never want to hear from you. Never ever ever come near us or you will really be sorry." According to Steve Small, Phil Hartman's attorney and close friend, she had difficulties regulating her emotions. I quote, "She got attention by losing her temper." Phil said he had to restrain her at times. Steve Small also claimed that Phil frequently withdrew and went to sleep after their arguments, preferring to let her calm down by the next day. It became apparent that Bryn had major substance abuse issues. This made everything worse. Small recalled Hartman saying about their relationship dynamics, "I go into my cave and she throws grenades to get me out." By the end of May 1998, Bryn had been in and out of rehab as she battled an addiction to both drugs and alcohol. When combined with her antidepressants, this led to violent outbursts. On the evening of May the 27th, after she had eaten dinner and had a couple of drinks with a close friend, she had another one of those outbursts. After an argument, Phil once more went to their bedroom, his cave. The couple owned 2 firearms. These were bought by Bryn after they returned to Los Angeles from New York. As Phil Hartman laid in bed sleeping, Bryn took one of these guns, raised it, pointed it at her husband, and pulled the trigger. Multiple shots struck Phil Hartman in the head and chest. His life and talent was snuffed out in that instant. After consuming more alcohol, an hour later, Bryn hysterically called her friend Ron Douglas. She told him that Phil had left her a message stating that he was out but would return later. Douglas suggested that Bryn sleep off what appeared to be a mixture of drink and mental health issues, but she chose not to. Instead, she arrived at Ron Douglas's front door approximately 20 minutes later, agitated and smelling of alcohol. In spite of his anger and concern, he decided to allow her into his house. He knew better than to test her patience when she was in this kind of state. After entering, she immediately fell to the ground in the living room. Douglas woke her up, terrified that she had overdosed. She immediately ran to the bathroom and repeatedly vomited. Bryn now kept screaming that she had murdered her husband. Douglas, however, didn't believe her for a second. She even revealed the murder weapon to him. Douglas inspected it but miscalculated the number of rounds in the chamber. He still didn't believe her. She eventually became sober enough to drive home, but she insisted that Douglas must accompany her. She called her friend Judy while she was driving and confessed once more. This time, Judy took her admission seriously and made arrangements to take her to the Hartman residence. First to arrive back were Bryn and Douglas. Douglas saw a gruesome image that confirmed that his friend had definitely committed the unimaginable act, as they made their way upstairs and turned into the Hartman's bedroom. He dialed 911 to report the horrifying reality that had revealed itself. This is what was said on that call.
Emergency operator 614.
Yeah, hi, this is Encino Boulevard and I think there's been a shooting here.
Do you see a victim?
Yes.
Okay, hold on for the paramedics. Stay on the line.
Okay.
Fire department emergency operator, how may I help you?
Hi, yeah, there's been a shooting.
How many victims?
Just one.
What part of the body?
I think around the head and neck.
The person who shot him, is he around?
Yeah, she's his wife.
The wife shot him and they're both there?
Yeah.
Hello, sir?
Yes?
So was this on purpose or was this an accident or what, sir? Do you know what happened?
I have no idea. She came from that house and she was drunk. She said she had killed her husband and I didn't believe her.
Okay, and they're both there right now?
Yeah, right.
We're going to send the police out there, okay? And where's the weapon now?
It's in my hand, okay, because she brought it to my house.
What is your name?
My name is Ron Douglas. Bryn's friends showed up as the police sped up to the house. Disturbingly, the couple's children were in the house not only when the attack happened, but were left alone in the home with their father's body. They were now taken out of the house. Child Sean described the gunshots as sounding like a door being slammed repeatedly. The LAPD's arrival now forced Bryn's hand. Bryn shut herself in the bedroom as the police drew closer, sat next to her husband, her victim, and she called her sister. When the police made their way upstairs and knocked on the door, Bryn hung up the phone with her sister and did to herself what she did to her husband.
Michelle Charlesworth joins us live from Rockefeller Center, home of the long-running show. Michelle.
Good afternoon, Roz. Well, celebrities who knew Phil Hartman have been reacting with shock to his very violent death. Steve Martin remembers him as a deeply funny and a very happy person.
Did you know about this case before? What do you think could have been done to prevent this from happening the way that it did? Let me know down in the comments. Please do hit like if you appreciate what I'm doing here. Thank you to everyone in the Dark Case crew. You too can become a channel member for just 99 pence. A huge thank you to my patrons. Your support makes a massive difference. You too can support my work and be thanked in every video for just $5 per month. So thank you to Rachel David, Kathy Green, David James, Addie Alexander, Karen Jones, L. Palmieri, James Harrington, Shane Woodward, Faster River, Stacey Krogerus, Summer Chambers, Mona Corona, Cepheid Variable, Anthony Watson, Jason Coward, and Jeremy Sebronek. Please do be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.
What, does your sister still have the knife?
Yeah.
And what is going on there?
I don't know, I just woke up.
Okay, who am I talking to now?
Her daughter.
Okay, and what's going on there? Who has the knife?
My sister.
Okay, does she still have it?
Mom? Okay. What happened?
Born on May 2nd, 1971 in Reynoldsburg, Lisa Canel was a 41-year-old resident of Willoughby Hills, Ohio. She worked as a social worker for the Cuyahoga County Department of Children and Family Services, and she had lived in Lake County for 12 years. She had been married to her second husband, Kevin Canel, a truck driver, for 6 years. In 2006, she married Kevin Canel and lived with him in Willoughby Hills, Ohio, with her daughter Megan Zanella from her previous marriage. Willoughby Hills is an average city in Ohio situated near to the southern shore of Lake Erie. In 2009, Lisa would give birth to her second daughter, Haley Canel, growing the household to 4 people. According to friends and family, she was described as a caring woman who loved to spend time with her children and enjoyed camping. In 2011, the family grew again when Sabrina Zunich was placed into foster care with Lisa and Kevin. Sabrina was 16 at the time and settled in with the family easily, owing largely to the stability the Canel family were able to provide. Sabrina Zunich was born on October 27th, 1994 in Cleveland, Ohio to Susan Edwards and Mark Zunich. Unfortunately, Sabrina's parents struggled with illicit substances and alcohol addiction, and were in and out of prison for most of Sabrina's childhood. At age 4, she was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, and she reportedly struggled with anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. She was raised primarily by her grandmother whilst attending Wycliffe High School, where she frequently engaged in fistfights. At the age of 14, Sabrina was moved into the Emma Cayley Receiving Home in Lake County, Ohio. There she would spend 2 years in and out of foster care until finally placed with the Canels in July of 2011. Initially, 16-year-old Sabrina fit in well with the Canels, and her grades reportedly improved during the time that she lived with them. However, she soon grew to resent her foster mother as she believed Lisa would give preferential treatment to her biological daughters. During this time, Sabrina grew closer to her foster father, Kevin, and she reported that their relationship evolved into a far more intimate one sometime in March of 2012. According to Sabrina, it began with simple massages, but over the fall and summer of 2012, these acts became more intimate and graphic, allegedly occurring on a very frequent basis. When Sabrina began attending Willoughby South High School, Kevin would drive her to school each morning. It was during this time they would often engage in intimate acts. As Sabrina and Kevin grew closer, the relationship between Lisa and Kevin began to become more tense. They would fight more and more often as the year of 2012 progressed. Friends of Kevin Canel stated that at this time he was considering divorcing Lisa. On May 16, 2012, Kevin took out a $250,000 life insurance policy on his wife, Lisa. This was one of many such policies that added up to nearly $800,000 in total payout were Lisa to pass away suddenly. Throughout this period of turmoil within the Canel family, Kevin allegedly began sending text messages to Sabrina. They indicated that he hated Lisa and they could build a family together once she was gone. Lisa was not blind to the relationship between Kevin and Sabrina, however, and became increasingly suspicious. It was alleged that at one point, Lisa told Sabrina she needed to move out of the Canel home by January 1st, 2013. During this time, it was also alleged that Sabrina began acting out at home and even threatened 13-year-old Megan with a sharp implement. On the morning of November 15th, 2012, Kevin drove Sabrina to school. After they parked, Kevin began crying, telling Sabrina about a fight he had with Lisa the previous night. According to Sabrina, he told her that he would hurt himself if Lisa didn't pass away soon. Sabrina also stated that she felt afraid for Kevin because she had fallen in love with him. She promised that she would end Lisa's life within 24 hours. In the early hours of November 16th, Sabrina donned a ski mask and took a large serrated sharp implement into her foster mother's bedroom before attacking her. At around 1 a.m, Megan was awoken by the sound of dogs barking and a commotion coming from Lisa's bedroom. She investigated, finding Sabrina in a ski mask attacking her mother with the weapon. Over an unknown period of time, she inflicted as many as 178 injuries, 2 of which were deemed to be fatal. She attempted to fight Sabrina off. Megan reported that at one point she was on top of Sabrina before being shoved aside. It was then that she called the police at approximately 1:15 a.m.
You need to get off the radio, Julius. What is going on? Who has the knife?
My sister.
What? Does your sister still have the knife?
Yeah.
And what is going on there?
I don't know. I just woke up.
Okay, who am I talking to now?
Her daughter.
Okay, and what's going on there? Who has the knife?
My sister.
Okay, does she still have it?
Mom? Okay. What happened? I don't know.
Is someone hurt?
She's still stabbing my mom.
She stabbed your mom?
Yeah.
Is she breathing at all? Justine, where's your sister at? What? I got everyone looking for you, honey. Where is your sister?
When police arrived, they found Sabrina covered in Lisa's vital fluids, still holding the sharp object she'd used to end her foster mother's life, now bent from the ferocity of the assault. She was immediately taken into custody, although responding officers stated Sabrina had suffered wounds of her own and appeared to be in shock. During a search of the house, Lisa's 3-year-old daughter Haley was found hiding in the bedroom closet. Kevin was driving a route in Michigan when police called him to inform them that his wife had passed. Kevin asked if his daughters were okay, and he was informed he would be able to pick them up at the local police station in Willoughby Hills. He arrived at 5 a.m. that morning to pick up his daughters. Officers that interviewed or interacted with Kevin in the immediate aftermath of the event described him as relatively calm, and indicated that he seemed to be more curious about the crime than he was distressed. Furthermore, authorities alleged Kevin became angered when he was told he would not be able to see Sabrina while she was in custody.
Mommy, please. You remember me, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you recall?
Yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Getting done with my homework? Going, I don't know, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bed.
And we're at home?
Mm-hmm.
What, anything unusual happen?
I don't know.
How do you get along with Kevin?
Kevin's a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's one of the one that helps me out.
Mm-hmm.
Because this has Megan to deal with, and so we made agreements a long time ago that if I need anything, that I can go to Kevin.
How about with Lisa? How do you get along with her?
Me and Lisa have never been the best. She's never seemed to like me, and she's been wanting me out of the house.
What's your thoughts on how Lisa is not alive now?
What?
Well, you had a knife. You stabbed Lisa.
I did.
You did. And Megan called the police.
That can't be true.
Krie, it is. I'm sorry.
Lisa's really dead?
Denise's dead. Sorry.
I don't think nobody else is hurt.
Nobody else was hurt. Thank goodness.
The forensic pathologist that conducted the autopsy, Dr. Phalo, would later describe some of the wounds as complex, meaning that either the knife or Lisa had twisted after being jabbed. Dr. Phalo also stated that one of Lisa's fingers and one of her thumbs had nearly been completely severed. Multiple defensive injuries were present, indicating Lisa had been awake at the time of the attack, and had bravely attempted to fight back. Unfortunately, Sabrina was able to jab Lisa deep enough around her jaw to sever her carotid artery, and likewise deep enough through Lisa's chest to collapse the lung beneath. Dr. Falo described the cause of death as multiple wounds, at least 178 in total of the head and neck, torso and extremities, with musculoskeletal, vascular and visceral injuries. For the first 6 months of the investigation, authorities believed Sabrina had committed the crime alone, or of her own volition. It wasn't until August 2013, after believing Kevin had abandoned her, that Sabrina reached out to investigators to arrange a plea deal. It was then that she told investigators about her relationship with Kevin and his wishes to end Lisa. Following Lisa's passing, Kevin had claimed nearly $800,000 in life insurance payouts and had begun to spend that money in a number of ways. He paid off his house, purchased a new home in Florida, put down payments on new cars, and purchased flying lessons. Very subtle, Kevin. Just a note from me, these insurance scams just blow my mind. Always so eager to get the money and so brazen with spending it. You just know he was going to buy his own light aircraft in the very near future. According to investigators, Kevin had contacted Lisa's place of work immediately following her death, inquiring about what kind of paperwork he would need to fill out in order to claim her life insurance. In October 2012, Sabrina had reached out to a friend, Autumn Pavlik, asking if she knew anyone who could end her foster mother's life for her. Autumn testified that Sabrina had told her Kevin and Lisa were planning on divorcing, but said that Lisa was worth more dead than alive. Investigators also found that Kevin had contacted Sabrina's social worker, asking if he would retain custody of Sabrina should he choose to divorce Lisa. Further investigation revealed Kevin's deeper connection to the crime. Allegedly, Kevin wished for Lisa to be ended as he feared he would lose custody of his 3-year-old daughter if he were to divorce Lisa. Sabrina alleged that, as part of his manipulation, Kevin told her they would raise his daughter together once Lisa was ended. Sabrina admitted that Kevin had coached her in how to commit the crime, stating that Kevin had instructed her to twist a knife to make the scene appear like a burglary gone wrong. She also stated that Kevin had advised her to plead insanity or self-defense should she be caught. Whilst no physical correspondence was uncovered to support this, investigators were able to pull phone records between Kevin and Sabrina's phones. They found nearly 1,500 calls or texts had been exchanged between the 1st and 15th of November 2012, with 78 of those occurring between 7:12 p.m. November the 15th and 12:48 a.m. November the 16th, just half an hour before Megan would call 911.
How you going, Ron Palmer? And then you told me you wanted to talk about his wife's work. Correct. That's the subject matter? Yes. So,
Kevin, do you know anything that was happening at the house the night before you left for work that night?
well, hang on a second. We just talking about his wife's work. What's going on at the house the night before is not his wife's work.
Okay. Where does your wife work at?
County Children's Institute.
Were you and Lisa in the process of going through a divorce?
Okay, now we're getting outside the scope.
Kevin was the first to go on trial, convicted of 6 counts of battery. This was for his relationship with Sabrina, 3 counts of complicity to commit an aggravated murder, and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder. Sabrina was asked to testify during his trial and brought forward her allegations surrounding their relationship, Kevin's grooming of Sabrina, and his planning and coaching of the crime. Kevin's defense attorneys claimed that, since there was no physical evidence directly corroborating Sabrina's testimony, he should be declared not guilty. The defense further went on to claim that Sabrina's testimony could not be trusted because she cooperated with the investigators only to lower her own sentence. Despite this, a jury found Kevin guilty of all 11 counts after only 9 hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to life in prison on August 6, 2014, eligible for parole after 30 years. The 6 battery charges for his relationship with Sabrina added 12 years years to his life sentence. After Kevin's trial, Sabrina was then convicted of aggravated murder. She pled guilty to all charges and was sentenced to life in prison on September 29, 2014, eligible for parole after 30 years. During the trial, Sabrina expressed a great deal of remorse, appealing to the judge and jury for forgiveness. "I want to say how sorry I am for all those I hurt. Lisa did not deserve what happened to her. I ask forgiveness to be given to me, not for my benefit, but for those who need the healing process to begin. I can't explain how much remorse I have and how much sadness I deal with." The judge agreed that Sabrina had been manipulated and used by Kevin, but stated her crime was far beyond a simple case of manipulation, and that she had only been granted parole because of her cooperation with investigators in August the previous year. Sabrina is now 27 as of February 2023 and is still serving her sentence in a Dayton Correctional Institution. She will be eligible for parole in 2042 when she will be 47 years old. Kevin is 52 as of February 2023 and is serving his sentence at the Lake Erie Correctional Institution. He will be eligible for parole in 2055 when he will be 86 years old. Lisa Canel was buried on November 20th, 2012 at the Davis Babcock Funeral Home in Willoughby. Her service was attended by friends and family. The family encouraged contributions to the Royal Family Kids Camp in lieu of bringing flowers to her service.
911, what's the location of the emergency?
My daughter is missing. She's gone. We can't find her anywhere. I've called all her friends.
How old is she?
11.
Okay, what's her name, ma'am?
Carly, Carlie.
And last name?
Brucia, Brucia.
Carlie Brucia was born on the 16th of March 1992. She resided with her mother Susan and stepfather Steve in Sarasota, Florida. Even though the family was separated, Carlie was very close to both her parents. She frequently visited her birth father in Long Island, New York. Carlie, now in 6th grade, was a smart girl and always attended school. She achieved high grades and was even voted maths whiz in 5th grade. She was also a Girl Scout and sang in the chorus at school. As soon as Carlie learnt to read and write, she began writing stories, sat at her desk, gifted to her by her father. Carlie was also active and liked to skateboard when and where she could. Those who knew her said she was a friendly and considerate child. She was described as being joyful and always smiling by her family. Now 11 years old, on February the 1st, 2004, it was Super Bowl Sunday. Carlie was still at her friend Danielle's house after a sleepover the night before. However, she wanted to go back to her mother's place before the game started. Carlie decided to walk back home because it was only around a mile away, a distance that could be walked in around 20 minutes. As Carlie left her friend Danielle's house at around 6 PM, Danielle's mother phoned Susan, Carlie's mother, to let her know Carlie was on her way. Susan, not really liking the idea of Carlie walking home alone, asked stepfather Steve to drive the route that Carlie was walking and pick her up to bring her home. As Steve drove, he was speaking with Susan on the phone the whole time, and what started off as a normal conversation soon escalated into a panic. Carlie wasn't where she should have been. She was nowhere to be seen as he drove the route to Danielle's house. He returned home hoping that somehow he had just missed her. But when he got back, sadly she wasn't there. She wasn't anywhere to be found. Carlie's mother dialed 911. Susan reported that Carlie had gone missing.
911, what's the location of the emergency?
My daughter is missing.
What's your address, ma'am? And your phone number? Okay. Has she been missing before?
No, she had a fight with her girlfriend. She decided to walk home, and we've been driving around for about an hour and a half. And it's now an hour and a half walk. She's gone. We can't find her anywhere. I've called all her friends.
How old is she?
11.
And when was the last time that she was seen?
It was at 6 o'clock, Steve. Around 6 o'clock.
And she was at a friend's house?
Yeah.
Okay, what's her name, ma'am?
Carlie, Carlie.
And last name?
Brucia, Brucia. She's just shy of 5 feet.
Okay. Do you know how much she weighs?
She's over 120 pounds.
Okay, what color hair does she have?
Dirty blonde.
And what color eyes?
Blue.
Police quickly showed up to the house to begin investigating. Other officers went to friend Danielle's house to gather more information. Police put out a BOLO, or a be on the lookout, for Carly. A BOLO is used to put officers on high alert for anyone matching the description given. However, things sadly weren't that simple. There was no sign of Carly that night at all, nor would her friends see her the following morning at school. The search for Carly was ramped up and police used scent dogs to begin their hunt. The dogs followed the scent taken from Carly's pillowcase to a car wash off Bee Ridge Road. The dogs had locked onto Carly's scent. She had been there. They took officers through the parking lot and to the back of the car wash. There, the scent trail went cold. Attending officers also discovered CCTV cameras during their search of the location. There were cameras facing the parking lot and the rear of the car wash. The cameras and the scent trail crossed paths. This would lead to the first major breakthrough in the case.
Car wash owner Mike Evanoff looks at tape from his surveillance cameras.
Just came in and saw her walking and him walking, and it just right away, right when I saw it, just drew chills and shivers right in my body.
Police accessed the surveillance tapes and skipped back to around the time that Carly left her friend's house, 6 PM. The footage from the camera that covered the front parking lot didn't show anything of interest. The camera that covered the rear of the car wash was motion activated. At 6:21 PM, the camera started recording. This is that footage. Carly is seen strolling through the parking lot in her red t-shirt and jeans, when a stocky white male with dark hair and average height approaches her. After being grabbed, you can make out a look of concern on Carly's face. She knows this isn't right. Carly is led by the man out of the view of the camera. Police were dumbfounded by how brazen this abduction was, but they now had more to work with to bring Carly home. The people closest to Carly were questioned by the police. Cases like this can often be solved simply by investigating those that knew the victim. Steve, Carly's stepfather, was interrogated. However, the fact that he was on the phone with Susan the entire time he was out of the house, which was backed up by his phone records, meant that it couldn't have been him. He was cleared from the investigation. Steve gave the police the name Ron Shockitz as a possible suspect in his eyes. Ron was dating Danielle's mother and was at the house at the same time as Carly. In addition, Steve told police that while looking for Carly, he had noticed a red truck on Bee Ridge Road. Steve noticed what he believed to be the same truck parked up on Danielle's drive. That truck belonged to Ron. However, Ron claimed he was driving his truck on Bee Ridge Road searching for Carly when Steve saw it. But at the time Carly actually vanished, as proven by the CCTV, Ron was at work. An alibi that proved to be solid. He too was cleared from the investigation at this time. Detectives returned to the CCTV footage. The reality of digital forensics are a long way from what you see on CSI. Noise can be removed and the image can be slightly improved. You can zoom in on footage, but if the data isn't there, then enlarging it will just enlarge the pixels, not make it clearer. Whilst working on the footage, they noticed the man that was seen with Carly was wearing a jumpsuit that had a name tag on it. However, the tag couldn't be read, even on the improved footage. However, a man wearing a jumpsuit with a name tag was still useful information. With the CCTV footage being widely shown to the public, a hotline was set up in the hope to identify the man. The line quickly amassed over 700 tips. However, it would be one call in particular that would crack this case wide open. On February the 3rd, a man phoned a line and believed he knew the man, and knew him well. He could tell it was him by the uniform, and by the way that he walked. He was his business partner, a man named Joseph Smith. Police looked into Joseph Smith's background and discovered that he had a long history of convictions running right back to 1993. They discovered he was 37 years old, he had 3 kids and worked as a mechanic, hence the jumpsuit. In an attempt to further link him to Carly's vanishing, Joseph's car was identified as a brown-coloured Lincoln. The CCTV footage was then combed for any sign of his car, but to no avail. Instead, they saw a light tan-coloured station wagon on the video at 6:18 p.m, just 3 minutes before Carly was taken. The licence plate was frustratingly unreadable on the low-quality security footage. This could not be linked to Joseph. Joseph was still a person of interest, so police went to his home to question him. He said that he had nothing to do with Carly's disappearance and was watching the Super Bowl at home, something he claimed that his landlord, Mimi Pincus, could verify. When questioned on it, Mimi did indeed verify that Joseph was at home at that time. When police showed him the image of him from the CCTV footage, Joseph admitted that it did look like him, but that it actually wasn't. Also revealed at this time was that Joseph was currently on probation. After police searched his car, they found illicit substances. This violated his parole conditions. Joseph Smith was arrested. Around 7 o'clock that same day, a man entered the police station to speak with them. He was Joseph's other landlord and went by the name Jeff Pincus. Jeff owned a light-coloured Buick station wagon that he had lent to Joseph the day before Carly vanished. Jeff realised that Mimi had gotten her dates mixed up when she gave her alibi for Joseph. According to Jeff, Joseph left that day at 3 p.m. and didn't return the car until Monday morning. Jeff said that when Joseph returned the car, he could tell something strange had happened in there. All of the seats had been moved, with the back seats being down. Items that were in the car weren't where they normally would be. Jeff also said he saw the news reports about Carly's case, and he too identified Joseph as the man in the footage. This was enough for police to bring Joseph Smith in for an official interview.
I want to just talk. You and I had some things to talk about, okay? Because some of the things at the house, we got to get straight. That's the most important thing.
Okay.
In this room is about the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's the most important thing that goes on in this room.
I was already advised to talk to a lawyer.
Joseph didn't give anything to the police. Instead, he asked to speak to a lawyer. The interview was over as quickly as it began. With Joseph back in jail due to his probation violation, his only lifeline to the outside world was a jail phone. He used it to call his brother, John. John, knowing his brother well, offered to help authorities to drag a confession out of his brother. He believed he would never confess directly to the police. On this phone call, Joseph shockingly confessed to everything. Police now had all the information that they needed. Brother John also confirmed that the person seen on CCTV did appear to be Joseph Smith. The search for Carly was over. Police believe that this is what happened that day. Joseph took the tan-coloured Buick and went for a drive. He took a mixture of different illicit substances, at which point he saw Carly making her 20-minute walk home from the sleepover. He saw Carly as an opportunity to take what he wanted. He grabbed her by the arm and led her to the borrowed car. There she was struck multiple times. She was R-worded in what was described to his brother sickeningly as rough. He then ended her and disposed of her. She was found 2.8 miles from the car wash where she was last seen, in the woods off Proctor Road behind a church, lying face up, only semi-clothed with multiple markings. Joseph's DNA and hair fibres were also found on Carly. The case against him was undeniable. The case went to trial in 2005. John, Joseph's own brother, gave testimony against him, revealing the phone call and the fact that he recognised him from the CCTV footage.
The jury took 5 hours to pour over the evidence. The surveillance video, the letter that Smith sent to his brother, and the recorded conversations between Smith and his mother where he admitted her.
Joe. The best thing that you could do is just try and explain it was an accident.
Mom, it was an accident, Mom.
I know that, Joe.
You don't think that I would do that on purpose, Mom?
No.
Joseph Smith was convicted of first-degree murder, crimes against a child, and kidnapping on October the 24th, 2005.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count one of the charges. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged.
He was sentenced to the death penalty after receiving a 10-2 vote from the jury.
I lost one of the most precious things to me in my life because of an animal, a disgusting, perverted animal.
However, the death sentence for Joseph was overturned on July the 18th, 2017. A new law was passed requiring a unanimous verdict from the jury in order to carry out the sentence. A new sentencing hearing was scheduled, but it was postponed. Disturbingly, brother John Smith believes Joseph had committed a similar crime in the year 2000, the case of Tara Riley in Bradenton, Florida, who was discovered behind a Walmart. That case, however, has never been officially solved. Sadly, Carly's mother passed away in 2017 following a long battle with addiction. Joseph Smith never met his punishment. He passed away in July 2021.
I've got a dead parks worker on the floor. A dead what? I've got a dead parks worker on the floor of the office.
Krie Nelson was born on the 13th of December 1980 to father Stan and mother Nan. She had a younger sister named Katie. They sometimes fought, but always made up. It's just what siblings do. Krie was described by people that knew her as well-liked and hard-working. Karrie's father, Stan, said about her, "Krie was a sweet girl. She was kind and loving and sensitive. She was probably too sensitive. She wore her heart on her sleeve, as they say. She was loyal to her friends and committed to her family and fiancé. I always knew she loved me, no matter what." In 1999, Krie graduated from Laverne High School in Laverne, Minnesota. She had been attending college in South Dakota. Krie started working at the Blue Mound State Park in Rock County, southwest Minnesota. She had worked at the park for the last 2 summers. Her intention was to soon go back to college and become a medical technician. She was there simply as a seasonal worker for the second summer. This was only planned to be a short chapter of her life before returning back to college. At Blue Mound State Park, there was a campground, climbing areas, an interpretive center, which is basically a museum, and a contact station. The contact station is where Krie was working. There, she had to offer vehicle and camping permits to campers, as well as to greet park visitors. Krie loved her job there since it allowed her to be active. It also allowed her to interact with a wide variety of individuals from all kinds of backgrounds. One individual that she worked with, however, had a background that brought feelings of unease. A co-worker named Stephen was someone that concerned Krie. She believed he could have been stalking her. Krie told her friends that he just wouldn't leave her alone. Krie was also aware that Stephen was a user of illegal substances, and he was even known to deal these substances whilst working at the park. The behaviour felt serious enough that Krie was considering reporting him to the police. By 2001, Krie had a fiancé, a man named Mike Kellen. This was a relationship that both Mike and Krie saw growing into something that would last a lifetime. Mike said that they planned to get married, have babies, and have a life, adding, "She was everything I ever wanted." Now Sunday, May the 20th, 2001, Krie was 20 years old. She was working the 8 AM to 3 PM shift. She worked alongside new co-worker Rebecca White that day. Rebecca was actually the daughter of Richard White, who was the manager of Blue Mound State Park. Richard, however, wasn't working that day. He instead spent the day at home with his wife, at a home that was located within the grounds of the park. It was only Rebecca's second day, so Krie was showing her the ropes. Rebecca was going to be working mainly in the museum, so after Krie taught her what she needed to do, at around 12:45 PM, Rebecca left the contact station and drove to the museum in the park's vehicle. This meant that Krie was now by herself in the office. It was raining that day, and whilst working, Rebecca had gotten wet. So at around 2 PM, she left her post at the museum and went back to her parents' house to change. This didn't take long as the house was also on the park grounds. A little after 2:30 PM, Rebecca returned to the contact station. She entered through the back door and discovered Krie laying on the ground. Karrie's ear was covered in blood. At first glance, this didn't look like an accident. Krie had been attacked. Rebecca hurried out the back door and back to her house to inform her parents that something had happened to Krie. At the same moment she left out the back door, she heard someone entering the contact station through the front entrance. Rebecca had a gut feeling that this was probably the same person that had attacked Krie, so she quickly left without looking back. Rebecca arrived home and grabbed Father Richard, who was napping on the couch. Rhonda, Rebecca's mother, dialed 911 at 2:45 p.m. Richard hurried over to the contact station. When he reached down to check Karrie's pulse, he found that she had already passed away. Richard also dialed 911, locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and pulled down the blinds.
I've got a dead parks worker on the floor. A dead what? I've got a dead parks worker on the floor of the office.
That day, 3 911 calls were made about the incident. Rhonda made the first, Richard made the second, and a park visitor made the third. The person who entered through the front entrance of the contact station as Rebecca was leaving was actually a park visitor who wanted to buy a permit. The female visitor entered the room and noticed that the fax machine receiver was hanging from its cable, which struck her as suspicious. As she walked over nearer to the counter, she could then see Krie laying on the floor. She fled the station and dialed 911. At this time, Mike, Karrie's boyfriend, was in Wyndham for a wake. Wyndham was around 6 hours away from the Blue Mountain State Park. He tried calling her at around 3:30 p.m. This was the time that Krie should have finished working, a great time for them to catch up. He first tried calling her cell phone and got no answer. He then tried calling Karrie's office number, still no answer. Mike was tragically unaware that Karrie's life was ended whilst writing a love letter addressed to him. A few minutes after the 911 calls were made, police showed up at the park. There were 2 grey bank bags missing from the safe. The bags contained $1,000 in each, meaning a total of $2,000 was missing. Paper was spread over the contact station's back area. The fax machine receiver was dangling from its cord as seen by the witness, giving the impression that a struggle had taken place there. The office's floor, ceiling and counter all had blood on them. Broken shards of plastic and a damaged chair armrest were visible in the office. Next to Krie, a fragment of rock with blue mounds engraved on it was lying on the ground. Police were unable to locate the rest of the rock, which was normally kept at the office as an ornament. Next to Karrie's body was a damaged Field Ranger wristwatch, along with a packet of Doral Light 100 cigarettes. Co-worker Stephen was someone that raised a high level of suspicion immediately. Police marked him as a person of interest. A possible motive for the attack could have been some kind of crime of passion. After all, Krie believed he was stalking her. It even could have been that he had discovered Krie was going to report him to the police, and this was a way of silencing her to ensure he remained out of the gaze of the police.
My beautiful little girl will never come running into my arms again saying, "I love you, Daddy." Whoever did this must be caught so that they can never do it again.
All traceable park visitors were contacted by police, which brought forward quite a few witnesses. Krie was spotted outside the contact station at 1:30 p.m. This was according to a couple who were camped out in the park. At 1:52 p.m, another camper observed Krie in the contact station as they entered to buy a permit from her. The window when this attack could have happened was getting smaller. In what seems like something from a movie, a love letter written by Krie helped the investigation to progress. Krie had been writing the letter to her fiancé, however the letter wasn't finished. It cut off partway through. On it she had written the time and date, 20th of May, 2 p.m. This love letter and the information that could be deduced from it led the police to believe that the assault took place approximately between 2 and 2:30 p.m. Just before 2:30 p.m, an Oldsmobile or Monte Carlo with 2 doors and a brown vinyl top drove past the campsite as seen by a couple staying there. They said it was driving well above the speed limit. something that stood out to them. The police investigation continued to progress with Carrie's autopsy. Her cause of death was revealed to be blunt force trauma with multiple traumatic injuries to the brain. At least 5 blows to the head were recorded in Carrie's case, but the pathologist thought there may have been more. The pathologist found that Carrie's head injuries were caused by severe blows that were delivered with a lot of power. Carrie's death was declared a homicide. Most of the engraved rock that was used to strike Carrie was missing. It was, however, later located in a creek. The pathologist concluded that it was most likely that this rock caused Carrie's head injuries. DNA samples were taken by police from the contact station. Carrie's DNA was found in the bloodstains and blood spatter in the room. Carrie's co-worker Stephen was still under investigation and was very much a suspect in her passing. His alleged history of stalking Carrie left fingers pointed in his direction. Under further investigation, it became clear that he had no alibi for the time that Carrie was believed to have passed. Police took fingerprints and DNA samples to further the investigation. The shattered wristwatch that was discovered close to Carrie's body included 5 DNA mixtures. A DNA mixture are profiles made up of the DNA of 3 or more different people. There was, however, no evidence that the watch belonged to Stephen, and his DNA did not match any profiles found at the scene. In fact, there were no matching results in the entire Minnesota forensic database. Other DNA sample databases from surrounding states were searched for a profile that matched the unidentified DNA samples from the wristwatch. These too came back with no positive results. Stephen was now ruled out of the investigation, leaving the police stunned and scrambling for new suspects. However, with no new information or leads, the investigation into Carrie's passing ground to a halt. The case was closed as a result. As DNA analysis methods advanced over the years, a second look at the DNA discovered on the wristwatch was conducted. In the early 2000s, DNA testing became quicker, more accurate, and required a smaller sample to generate a profile. With new methods and technology, authorities conducted new searches of the Minnesota DNA databases, as well as databases from neighboring states. In April 2007, South Dakota's database discovered a potential match: a man named Randy Lee Royal Swaney. Police took a fresh DNA sample from Randy, who at the time was imprisoned in South Dakota for burglary. It confirmed that his DNA was part of the DNA mixtures discovered on the watch. Additional investigations revealed that his wife, Dawn Swaney, may also have contributed to some of the DNA found on the watch. Without these DNA matches, Randy would not have been involved in the investigation. He wasn't registered as a visitor to the park that day, so didn't get questioned by the police in the early stages of the case. There was also no evidence that he and Carrie had any previous relationship or dealings, either professionally or personally, on any level. This prior lack of connection meant that more evidence was needed to build a believable case. Investigators sought to strengthen Randy's connection to Carrie's passing, or to eliminate him from their investigation. At the crime scene, multiple prints were identified. Randy's right palm print, left palm print, and left thumb print were found on a flyer. The flyers were strewn around the floor near Carrie's body. Randy's finger and palm prints were compared against the latent prints discovered in the contact station. 2 palm prints found on the counter at the contact station were also identified as Randy's. Police examined Dawn's alibi, that's Randy's wife, for the day that Carrie passed. They could indeed confirm that Dawn was at work at the time. She then went on to aid the investigation. She gave police permission to inspect a storage facility that she had rented. They discovered some family photos which would prove to be extremely useful. Randy can be seen in a few of the pictures smoking Doral Light 100s and sporting a Field Ranger wristwatch. Other pictures showed him driving an Oldsmobile Delta 88 in cream with a brown vinyl top, the same vehicle that was seen by witnesses at Carrie's location at around 2:30 p.m. on the day that she passed.
I'm Paul Soflin. I'm an agent with the State Crime Bureau, Minnesota. And Randy, we investigate crimes all over Minnesota type of thing. And we wanted to talk to you a little bit about some things here that had come up.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't understand. I guess, first of all, I'd like to know what's going on.
Well, we wanted to talk to you about, possible crimes you may be able to help us with, or that you could be involved with. I don't know, that type of thing. So that's what we wanted to talk to you about. But, you having those rights in mind, you got to decide now. You can stop answering at any time, and that's what I told you. So.
Right. Yeah, and at this point, I guess I would like to have a lawyer because I don't understand what's there.
All right. I guess we are finished. We would like to talk to you. I mean, it's something that, can put you in or put you out.
What way? I don't understand.
Well, I don't know if we tell them it's in regards to a case in Rock County, Minnesota.
Rock County?
Yeah. A few years.
Okay.
But you lawyered up, so, if you don't want to talk to us, if you change your mind, then you can call us.
Dawn spoke to Randy on the prison phone. The line was tapped and recorded by the police.
What are you doing?
Nothing. You're not coming up to visit?
No.
Why not?
I was talked to yesterday by detectives.
Okay. About what?
I don't know. What was it about, Randy?
I don't know.
They found my DNA and your DNA on a watch in Minnesota in some campground called Blue Mound.
Okay, they didn't tell me that.
Well, that's what they told me. If I'm going to end up going to prison for the rest of my life for something that I didn't do and you did, I'm going to be mad. I'm more mad now. Because there's something else you're not telling me.
No, it's not.
How in the hell do they have our DNA on a watch?
I have no idea.
What do you mean you have no idea? I've not been in Minnesota. Have you?
No.
How about May of 2001, Randy? Like shortly after we got married?
I don't believe. No.
Don't play stupid, Randy. This is serious. You know something, Randy. You have to tell me. I'm going to end up going to prison for something I don't know nothing about. What happened May 20th, Randy? It was on a Sunday. It was a week before Memorial Weekend.
I don't know.
It's Blue Mound.
I don't know.
Somewhere in Minnesota.
I've never been there.
Somebody has our DNA on a watch.
She recounted a day in May 2001 when the car was suspiciously damaged. She questioned him about his involvement in the death of Krie. However, he assured her that he was not involved, adding that he hadn't ever even been to the Blue Mound State Park. But this wasn't enough to convince the police that he wasn't involved. Police believe that the following is what happened on the day in question, and what they would put forward in their prosecution argument. Randy went into the contact station that day and stole the cash out of the register, thinking that it was left unattended and that he was alone. However, he wasn't alone. Krie was nearby. When she challenged him, he punched her in the nose and pulled her into the back room in order to get her to unlock the safe. He put pressure on her neck and used her uniform and necklace as ligatures as he dragged her towards the money. As soon as Krie opened the safe and Randy had the money that he wanted, things turned even darker. Krie had seen Randy's face, so he decided to end her life. He got what he went for, so he hit Krie several times in the head with the engraved rock. A grand jury charged Randy with first-degree murder in 2007. In 2008, the case went to trial. Randy entered a not guilty plea. Randy's own family testified that he smoked Doral Light 100 cigarettes, frequently wore the Field Ranger wristwatch, and that he drove an Oldsmobile Delta 88 in 2001. Two inmates that knew Randy spoke to the jury, telling them that he had confessed to the crime. One inmate claimed that Randy knew the location of the Blue Mound State Park and was aware that his watch had been left there when Krie was killed. The second inmate claimed that after speaking with the police about the slaying of Krie, Randy informed him that "they got me this time and I'm gonna do life." The defense argued that Randy was not at the park on the day in question and did not kill Krie. Randy also gave testimony at the trial. He said that on May the 20th, 2001, he was driving the Oldsmobile on the way to South Dakota. He said that day he went fishing alone. He claimed that the damage to the car mentioned by Dawn resulted from a collision with a tree stump on the way home. Randy admitted in court that despite his initial denials, he may have visited the contact station at some point to inquire about the camping fees, despite first stating he had never even heard of Blue Mound State Park. He claimed, however, that he wasn't there on the day in question. The prosecution questioned him, however, if he hadn't visited in May, how were his finger and palm prints on flyers that had only recently been put out? A park worker testified that she had only distributed those flyers 4 days prior to Carrie's slaying. Randy was now unable to offer an explanation. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Randy was found guilty. He was given a life sentence in prison with no chance of parole. Randy, however, addressed Carrie's family during the sentence hearing and assured them of his innocence. Randy said, "There is still a murderer out there."
That I did not kill Krie Nelson.
Carrie's father, Stan, sadly passed away in April of 2022.
Orange County 911, where's your emergency?
This man just came out to my door and said his wife, he thinks she just got hit by a car.
The question is, if need be, would you submit to a polygraph examination? Reasoning for that?
Just because I know they're completely in a mispoint for so it's pointless to take one.
On February the 6th, 1979, Justine Elizabeth Schwartz was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. There, she and her family remained until she was 11 years old. After that, she spent several years in Germantown, Tennessee, before her family relocated once more to Charlottesville, Virginia. Her dream was to work with children, a dream that she realized after becoming an elementary teacher. A lifelong lover of reading, she wanted to instill this passion in her students. Justine was a big animal lover and was a regular volunteer at animal shelters. She loved spending time with her family and friends. She was passionate about her kindergarten students and was well known for being kind to everyone whose path she crossed. Shortly after turning 20 in 1999, Justine was working in a Lowe's home improvement store as a cashier. There she met a man named Eric Abshire, 26, who worked in the store as a manager. They got to know each other and romance soon blossomed. Eric told Justine that he had 2 daughters from a previous relationship. This wasn't something that concerned Justine with her nurturing nature. After all, she dreamt of a career working with children. Eric decided to switch his career path quite dramatically. He enlisted in the Marines. By Friday the 3rd of November 2006, Justine was now 27 years old. She was now known as Justine Abshire after recently marrying Eric, a man she had dated for 7 years. She was excited for her life as a newlywed. Her dream of having her own children was getting ever closer. Her desire to have children was somewhat quelled by the fact that Eric had 2 daughters from a previous relationship. Just 5 months into their marriage, Justine was content with her new small family. Eric left the Marines and formed his own hauling firm and operated a dump truck for the business. Justine also landed a new position which was absolutely ideal for her. She worked as a kindergarten teacher at Emerald Hill Elementary in Culpeper, Virginia. On November the 3rd, Justine arrived at her job. All of her co-workers sensed something was wrong with her that day. She was not her usual happy self. Her eyes were puffy and nearly closed. Her co-workers believed that this must have been due to her crying heavily. However, Justine assured them not to worry, saying she was fine. She hadn't been crying and it was just her allergies playing up. Some of her co-workers attended the same master's degree classes as her. This meant that they saw her for a second time later that day. Justine was now wearing sunglasses inside. Additionally, she was 30 minutes late to the class, highly unusual. This degree was her passion and something she based her future upon. At 7 o'clock, when class was over, Justine quickly left without giving people a chance to talk to her. She returned home. The following morning at 1:57 a.m, a 911 call was placed. It was to report a hit and run.
Orange County 911, where's your emergency?
This man just came out to my door and said his wife, he thinks she just got hit by a car.
This is when someone or something is hit by a car and the offending driver flees the scene. Emergency services sped to attend. There, Eric was found in the middle of Taylorsville Road in Barbersville, Virginia, agitated and sobbing uncontrollably. Justine, his recently wed wife, was in his arms, around 600 feet from her car. When checked over by paramedics, it became apparent that Justine had already passed. She appeared to have experienced many injuries as a result of being hit by a vehicle. So how did this happen? Eric spoke to the police and said Justine called him at 1:19 AM. She was calling Eric to pick her up, saying that her car had broken down around 5 miles from home. Eric got the location from his wife and took his motorbike to pick her up. However, when he arrived, he discovered her laying in the road. According to Eric, he sat next to her and covered her with his jacket. He claimed that he then went in search of assistance. Eric ran to numerous homes on the road. One house he knocked on answered and dialed 911 for him. This call was made at 1:57 AM. Bear in mind this was 2006, so Eric probably would have had a cell phone. He was a businessman and a family man, so it seems like he would have taken a phone with him, but I guess this was a pretty urgent situation. He could have just forgot it. However, police discovered he did actually have his phone on him. He said he just didn't realise. This seemed like a tragic hit-and-run case, but that perception gradually started to fade. There were none of the normal signs that police would expect to see. No smashed glass, no tyre marks or debris were found on the road. And despite Justine's numerous injuries, neither debris nor blood were present on her or her clothing. Based on the physical evidence, police were of the opinion that Justine was not just hit by a car while standing in the middle of a road, but rather that foul play had occurred elsewhere and she was placed in the road later. Police also learned that Justine's car was fully functioning, despite the fact of Eric saying she had called him saying her car had broken down. Eric's story was folding like a cheap suit. Justine's sister Lauren and her parents Heidi and Stephen were very close to Justine. Eric didn't call them to let them know the tragic news. He instead left that task down to his brother. They were utterly shocked and devastated. But as the initial dark, devastating cloud began to lift, the family instead felt a deep confusion. Nobody knew Justine better than them. They couldn't understand why she would decide to drive alone at night, as she was terrified of the dark. She was sensitive and even said to be afraid of her own shadow. Additionally, they were curious as to know how her body ended up 600 feet from her car, laying there in the middle of the road. They couldn't understand why she would have left her handbag, coat and keys in the car and started walking away, especially when she had already contacted Eric and requested him to come and pick her up. It was cold and pitch black outside. They believed that their Justine would have just waited in the car. But it wasn't until 2 days after Justine's memorial service that things started to fall into place. When Justine's mother Heidi entered a restaurant, she was visibly upset. This is her own words about what happened next. It was a day or two after Justine's memorial service. I walked into this little restaurant and I just had one of those, what I call mother moments, when it just washed over me and I just lost it. I just burst into tears and this woman behind the counter said, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong? Are you sick?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I've just lost my daughter, you may have heard about it." She was the kindergarten teacher who was hit and killed by the car. And she looked at me and she said, "That was no hit and run. She was murdered. And her husband is the prime suspect." So it turned out that the rumour mill was turning quickly in this town. Officers now spoke with Eric once more.
Do you have any suspicion of what might have happened?
I like to think she got hit, and she wasn't scared the last seconds of her life, but I think that either one of these people are just somebody out drinking and driving. I think they drove by, saw a beautiful woman on the side of the road, went down, turned around, tried to get her in her car, and I think she got scared. I think she fell from it. They saw her face, and I think they hit her. I have no doubt in my mind she was going up. Big circle and back. Situations like this, Josh would find the people.
Well, we'll work on it. We'll try our darndest.
They said there was not a single black mark, like whoever did it never even have to brake, try to slow down, try to swerve away from it.
Anything else that we should know or you need to tell us?
No. No, like I said, when you look it up, you're going to see that her credit was absolutely spotless. And like I said, mine was slow because we made sure that anytime we always paid hers because the house, the land, everything was going in her name.
The question is, if need be, would you submit to a polygraph examination?
Yeah.
Reasoning for that?
Just because I know they're completely inadmissible in court, so it's pointless to take one.
Eric assured them that the night this happened, it was a typical evening. He said after she finished her class, Justine arrived home after 7 o'clock, and then shortly after that, Eric arrived home too. He had been visiting his ailing mother at the Martha Jefferson Hospital. After then spending some time at home with Justine, Eric got an urgent call from the hospital. His mother's health had quickly gotten worse. According to Eric, he went back to the hospital and stayed there until 11:30 p.m. After leaving the hospital, he didn't drive straight home. Instead, he drove to Ruckersville, Pennsylvania to their storage unit where he kept his motorbike. He told police he then went for a ride to calm down. He said he then arrived home at around 12:20 a.m. When Justine woke up, she said she wanted to talk with him. Eric told the police that they got into a fight because Justine wanted to talk about his mother's health and he did not. He told her that he needed some alone time, and Eric reported that Justine said, "Well, maybe I need to be alone too." Eric claims that Justine then left the house in her 2002 Ford Mustang. Eric told the police that he wasn't concerned because he thought that Justine would just return home later. He said he sat up and watched TV. At 1:19 a.m, Justine then called him. He said that she sounded angry but didn't sound scared. She requested his help after telling him about the car issues. She gave him her precise location. After Justine phoned, he claimed it took him about 10 to 15 minutes to leave the house, saying he needed to put on his shoes, grab his jacket, keys and helmet. Eric said that he then found Justine between 1:39 a.m. and 1:44 a.m. Eric's version of events did not sit well with police. They dove deeper into the crime scene, coroner's findings, and the lives of both Justine and Eric. A hunch took 4 years to turn into a solid case. Finally, Eric was accused of murder in the first degree. According to the prosecution, Eric ended his wife for one reason: money. The court was informed about Justine's changes in the months prior to that November night. Eric didn't want Justine speaking with anyone else on the phone or meeting up with them in person. He even made her refuse to accept a bouquet of flowers that a friend had sent as a housewarming present. They thought Eric had staged the entire hit and run, ending Justine somewhere else and then bringing her to the road. It was their contention that he did it to obtain $1.5 million in insurance funds. According to the prosecution, Justine's injuries were inconsistent with her having been hit by a car. She sustained 113 injuries from blunt force trauma to the head, bones and organs. However, the scene was almost completely devoid of blood. 2 medical examiners provided testimony. Due to her injuries, they backed up the prosecution's case. Alison Crawford, the mother of Eric's 2 children, said their relationship started in high school. According to her testimony, less than 2 hours before Eric discovered Justine laying on the road, he asked Alison if she could imagine getting married to him. 43 calls were made between them that day. She was informed by Eric that he was still interested in her. He asked if there was any chance for our relationship. He said he never should have married Justine. She was a huge regret in his life. Steve Schwartz, Justine's father, gave testimony. He said that his daughter was the owner of the couple's credit cards. The couple had amassed a crippling $85,000 of debt. Eric was also the beneficiary of multiple insurance policies regarding his wife. He filed a claim 2 weeks after her passing that would have seen him receive between $100,000 and $1.5 million. A commercial insurance policy taken out through his business could have seen him receive $5 million. He also filed for bankruptcy in 2009, 3 years after Justine's passing, suggesting that without this insurance money, he couldn't stay afloat. Eric also allegedly had an affair with a lady a month prior to his wedding to Justine, and he saw this woman again just 3 days after Justine's passing. It was also revealed that Eric addressed Justine as Thing. Lauren, Justine's sister, stated, "For the 7 years before she was killed by Eric, I watched my sister's life start to fade. She became quiet, withdrawn, she became poor, she became scared. She became the victim of domestic violence, which I saw with my own eyes. In hindsight, I feel like I watched her die." It was also revealed that Eric had a violent past. He was charged with the malicious wounding of Allison, the mother of his children, a situation where a verbal disagreement escalated into turning physical. The jury found Eric guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. Do you think the punishment fits the crime here? Let me know down in the comments. Join the Dark Case family by hitting subscribe now and turning on notifications. Like the video to boost the signal of this case. Thank you to all my patrons: Rachel David, Kathy Green, David James, Addy Alexander, Karen Jones, Elle Palmieri, James Harrington, Shane Woodward, Faster River, Stacey Krogerus, Summer Chambers, Mona Corona, Cepheid Variable, Anthony Watson, and Jeremy Sebranek. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.